At the beginning of Parshat Vaera, Moses spoke to the Israelites of the promises God had made to their ancestors, of the Holy Land and their destiny to go there. But the children of Israel would not listen to him at first. After 400 years of slavery, they were skeptical. It seemed, from their perspective, like God had completely forgotten about them. And that is where the plagues really begin. You might think that the plagues were all about punishing the Egyptians or proving God's might to Pharaoh. And they were. But they were also a powerful way for God to come alive again in the lives of the Israelite slaves. Moses and his brother Aaron went to Pharaoh with a simple, basic message. You've heard it before. Let my people go. Now, Pharaoh wasn't used to people telling him what to do, and of all the many gods in Egypt, he had never heard of the God of Moses, so he demanded a sign. Aaron cast down his staff, and it turned into a snake. But Pharaoh's magicians were able to do the same thing with their magic. Even when Aaron's snake ate the others and turned back into a staff, the Pharaoh was still not convinced. His heart hardened, and he would not let the Israelites go. So God told Moses and Aaron to stretch out the staff over the waters of the Nile and say, By this shall you know that I am the Lord. See, I strike the waters in the Nile, and they will be turned to blood. The fish will die, and the water will stink, so that none may drink for 7 days. And so the waters turned to blood, even water in bowls and cups, and Egypt suffered. After 7 days had passed, Pharaoh would still not let them go, so God told Aaron to stretch out his arm again over the water and bring up frogs onto the land. And they came up onto the land so that every surface swarmed with their squishy, warty bodies. Pharaoh couldn't take it, and he promised to let the people go. So God caused the frogs to die. The Egyptians swept them up into enormous piles till the land stank. But there was relief, and with the relief, Pharaoh's heart hardened again, and he took back his promise. And so God sent more plagues, one after another, and each time when it got really bad, Pharaoh would promise again to let the people go. And each time the plague ended, his heart would harden, and the promise would evaporate. So it went with blood and frogs, and on for 10 plagues: lice, insects, pestilence, boils, hail which turned to fire when it struck the land, and 3 more terrible plagues which we'll hear about in next week's Parsha. With every plague, the children of Israel watched as their God fought on their behalf for their freedom. With every new wonder, they were more and more sure that a terrible and awesome power existed beyond themselves. They began to remember who they were, to have hope that Pharaoh could be defeated, and to imagine that their lives might serve some purpose beyond slavery. And yet, when we, the descendants of these very slaves, remember the plagues each year at our Passover Seder tables, we still do not celebrate the plagues themselves with joy. They may have been the key to our escape from slavery and the agent for our reawakening to God in the world, but they caused tremendous suffering. And so, when we name the plagues each year, we remove a drop from our glasses for each one, a reminder that we should never rejoice in suffering, even the suffering of our enemies.
So that is a message that smart people take to heart, that we're not, I mean, for one, not supposed to take, pleasure in the suffering of our enemies, but second, that you're not supposed to treat Egyptians bad. Like there was a while last year when I was on Clubhouse quite a bit, and there was this one. I mean, probably about the same age as me, but this guy. I mean, I can't use a word for him other than a kid. He acted like a little kid, but um, just also to qualify this, I have nothing against Coptics. I actually really like Coptics. I mean, not any more than anyone else, but it just so happened that this guy had a persecution complex, and he was convinced that Jews hated Coptics because of what his ancestors had done to us. And it's like, dude, you're spouting this out of your ass. Nobody hates you for being Coptic. Nobody even hates you for being annoying. We're just trying to explain to you that we don't hate you. And so it was a really strange interaction. But anyway, why did I bring this up? Oh, right. That is something I kept explaining to him, that we're not, that literally there's this idea, don't hate an Egyptian for you were a foreigner in their land. Like, yet somehow he thinks that Jews are being taught to hate Egyptians. It's complete narishkeit. Like he at the end of the day, I think he was probably bullied by some people who were Jews, and so he thinks it's because he was Egyptian. And again, you might have some people who they, at the end of the day, they might have like, because he said that they called him like dirt. And again, it doesn't make sense because he said that they called him a dirty, what was it? He said dirty meets rhyme, but the thing is that's not what someone who is speaking Hebrew would say. That like if they wanted to call someone, like an Egyptian, they'd say mitzri. They wouldn't say mitzrayim. It makes no sense. So that makes me think he was just speaking out of his ass. But anyway, welcome, Avi. How are you doing? Avi?
Great, thank you. I'm here listening. Go on.
Oh yeah, check out what I harvested yesterday. This was let's see. This is acacia.
Looks like a didge.
Like a what?
Didgeridoo.
Yeah, it's interesting also because the thorns look oddly breast-like. Like it almost reminds me of the was it Artemis of Ephesus? But it's also just kind of interesting because of the connection that the acacia tree does have with the figure of like the divine feminine. I still need to. Yeah.
I was going to say I was sorry for your, your Coptic friend who has the persecution complex. It's far too common that people assume that those in another group are taught something. Again, I can't say that there's nobody in the world that hates them for being Coptic. There are always unreasonable people out there, but there are Jewish people who think that Christians are taught to hate Jews because of that too. Again, it's just, when you start buying into stereotypes rather than looking at the person in front of you, you run into problems. Tag.
Yeah, definitely. But it's really interesting because I'm oh, hey Halsey, how are you? But yeah, I mean this whole story, especially with the blood in the water, obviously, I mean nowadays people might think, oh, that sounds like da 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 da. But no, what I'm thinking is this is actually invoking a far older tale, and that is of Hathor and the Nile. Hathor and the Nile of blood. This looks like it should be.
Among the deities of the ancient Egyptian religion, Hathor was considered one of the most popular goddesses. Her widespread worship and many legends described her as a mother goddess, as well as the patron goddess of the sky, the arts, joy, motherhood, marriage, festivals,
No wonder she
miners,
was
and
associated
love,
with Asherah.
to name a few. Due to the fact that
Wait,
she was
with
a strong feminine,
miners, as in like
miners and
copper
love,
miners.
to name a few. Marriage, festivals, miners,
Yeah.
and love, to name a few. Due to the fact that she was a strong feminine figure, she was
And then
particularly
wait,
admired
what was the
among women.
hieroglyphic for her name?
Due to the
It
fact
was
festivals.
Is interest. I think this is okay. This is fascinating because if I remember correctly, this is on the left is the hieroglyphic for, well, you have house, but within the house is bread, which is also kind of interesting because house of bread, bit lechem, also like associated with I mean, not as directly, but more so through the typology, the idea of like, I mean, there's people who associate that with like Virgo, the idea of like, because that's the house associated with bread, because of the fact that what is it, the wheat and the harvest of the wheat. But then you have, I don't know enough of the hieroglyphic to actually know what these two are. The context of this almost looks like it's something to do with happiness, but I'm not 100% sure. And then actually, I'm going to pull this up because there is a way I could do that. Gardener's list. Y'all ever look at hieroglyphics like a lot? This is something that I started doing a few months ago when I wanted to try to come up with like a... Oh, wait, let's see. So, wait, does it have a full list? Here. So, going down here. So, wait, where was it? I think it was further up. I must have missed it. So, yeah, mouth and then face. Let's see, Hathor. Happy? Face, maybe. Oh, okay, interesting. So it is face. I think it's a variant of face at least. So that means, so we're looking at this right now. You can see this, and then we saw the sign for mouth. So, and then then there's also, I don't want to forget this. The let's see, where the symbols for the gods. Oh yeah, and here you can see house. Oh, interesting. This actually seems so variant of 06. So it means a temple, a tomb, or enclosure. So it must be further up, yeah. It's also interesting because here, look at this. Seishat, who is the goddess of hemp, cannabis. Where is it? Her symbol. I think it's further up, or did I might have scrolled too far down. Oh, dang it, I think I did. No, it's down here. Here. Where? Okay, here. So look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's a 7, 7 stars, or I mean 7-pointed star. But it's clearly stylized hemp. It's a hemp leaf. But yeah, I just want to share that. Okay, where's the gods and goddesses? God? All right, here. So if you look down here, so it has a different gods of Egypt. Zoom out a bit. So here you have, where's Hathor? It should have her there. Okay, that's really weird. It usually has Hathor listed, but I guess it doesn't in this list. I know it's on Wikipedia for sure. Okay, here it is. But it does not actually show. Okay, list of hieroglyph. Okay, here. Perfect. It's the woman. Oh wow, I didn't even connect that before. The woman with the sun. Wait, is it the in Revelation or whatever? The woman with the sun at her. Is it the sun at her feet or the sun at her head?
I remember the sun at her feet.
Ah, damn. Anyway, so here you can see Hathor is here, and she has her. Dang it, scrolled too far up. Hathor is right here, and shows her beautiful headdress, which you'll notice is horned, and there's the sun between the horns. and so that's indicative of the fact that she's a cow goddess. But yeah, I just thought it's kind of interesting. But to get back to this, I just I see the hieroglyphics. I'm like, I try to read it. I see Hebrew, I try to read it. I see anything, and I have any grasp on the
By the
knowledge.
way, this
Yep.
was the representation of Yahweh as or Baal as a sun god, or the with the son of Shemesh in Kings. It is written that along with the Baal worship, they had what called Chamanim from Chama, Shemesh. So Baal had a chariot of fire like Apollo, and of course Yahweh is considered to be the cow god, or the ox god, or the calf god. The Israelites had sins with the golden calf.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm trying to say is that sun and horns are both attributes of Yahweh.
Definitely. And another thing that's really interesting is the about the horned altars.
No, yes, in Tel Arad, or in not just in Tel Arad, but in every time the altar of the temple is portrayed, it is portrayed with what called karnot hamizbeach, the horns of the altar,
And
which if one just came and hold them, he was considered protected, like Yoav, the head of David's army.
or like Quasimodo's mom in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I'm kind of joking, but I'm not. But the other thing that's interesting is what they were used for functionally in the sacrifice. That they like you were supposed to use them to actually tear apart the sacrifice.
I don't know.
Here, let me see what I can find on that.
Yeah, I was going to comment really quick on that. What some of what you're saying there brings back memories of the idea of the moon god Sin, because the idea of horns was often associated with the moon and the crescent moon. And the idea of a sun with horn, a sun associated with horns could be a sun and the moon combination. Just going to tag on that.
Let's see.
But as far as I know, the Luna Bull, a so-called Luna Bull, was an attribute of, I think, Artemis. However, it was indeed an attribute of sin, but I don't know if in the Jewish worship it was a lunar or sun worship.
No, I totally agree. What about the thoughts about the bull being adopted during the stay in Egypt from the Apis bull tradition?
I think you're right. By the way, Apis is a later development of the Greek period, but the bull was sacred to the Egyptian god. I don't remember who.
Well, I was going to say the Apis bull pre-existed the Greeks. I was going to say Ptolemy created Serapis, combining, Osiris and Apis together. That was his baby.
You know
With
better than me.
Yeah, with the look that looks like Jesus. That was the long-headed, long-haired, bearded guy with the modus, the plant pot on top of his head. That was Serapis. But the
The,
Apis, I know the Apis bull, Cambyses, who was Cyrus's the great son, got into all sorts of trouble for slaughtering the Apis bull when he had conquered Egypt, and that was in the about what was that, about 530 BC. So that was before Alexandria, a couple hundred years before him. Tag.
Let's see. I don't know why I can't find a sacrificial victim torn apart altar. It might have been Roman religion, but now I'm not even able to find this. At least what I remember is
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it was in Greek, not Rome, as a part of Dionysus worship. Or
potentially.
I know that Orpheus also was torn apart.
Let's see. Oh, this might be something. Let's see. Okay, here, I think this is an indication. So Psalm 118:27. Let's see. Psalm 118:27. Okay. Okay, yeah, so there's El Adonai. So this is interesting. Here it renders it as Adonai is El, but it seems more evident that this is actually a compound, like El Adonai, Vaera, what is this? He has like shined upon, or has provided, he has enlightened us. Isru Chag, bind the Chag be'avotim. What's avot? But okay, so this is interesting.
Ropes or some heavy ropes or thick ropes. Cords.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that it doesn't say like Zvacha Chag. It's just Chag. It just like implies the festival, like festival sacrifice, but it doesn't actually say sacrifice.
Maybe this is for the sacrifice of the festival.
Yeah.
Like he is writing there, because generally when you're talking about a festival in the Jewish scripture, you're talking about the sacrifice, the main event of the festival, the sacrifice.
So, I mean, this isn't what I was thinking of, but it is kind of like, okay, what? There's got to be something that I'm missing, and even though it's a bit off topic, I really feel like I need to at least figure out if I'm just misremembering things. Okay, so let's see. Why can I not scroll down? Shit. Uh-oh. V-tab. It is not letting me scroll down. Shoot. Seems like it might just be this tab. Anyway, here. Well, you know what? I'm not going to fuss too much about that.
Minors, and love, to name a few. Due to the fact that she was a strong feminine figure, she was particularly admired among women. As her fame and popularity grew over the centuries,
Oh,
her
also before I
attributes were
forget,
later adopted by several
so we don't have a backload of this. Let's see. Zero says Ola. Hathor, Lady of the Turquoise. Where first inscription of L in Sinai. Turquoise mine. Bread as hieroglyph for the feminine ending. Oh, you're right. Bread is brass profile encircled with X hot cross buttons. Letter T from X lowercase t. By the obviously, by the way, the right pronunciation is Hathor. Hathor or Hathor?
Hathor.
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 Or Hathor if you can't pronounce it as chet.
Wait, so it would have been with a chet?
Hathor.
Hathor.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because at least how I see that at least how I'd vocalize that would be hat whore, but that's just because I'm reading that as hat and whore. Let's see. By the way, same thing. Symbol of the sun. OXO. Ash cakes to Asherah. Ashes. We all fall down. If we had too much hash cakes, sure. Horn headdress for gods in Sumer. Cow skull altars in Catalhoyuk. Manu and Nemo, twin brothers, one a bull, sacrifice to create the world, Proto-Indo-European predecessor to Tiamat, slain by Marduk to create the world, body parts become aspects of the world. Cool. Also, if you want to join the links in the...
By the way, another anecdote is that instead of thought, it should be said thought.
Thought?
Thought instead of THOTH, thought.
But I mean, isn't even that a Greek, like a Hellenization?
Yes, but we are staying we are staying loyal to the original Egyptian form.
I was going to say, wasn't the original Egyptian like Demuti or something like
No,
that?
I thought it was Jehuti.
Jehuti, that's what I was trying to say.
And also, Horus is Chor.
Yeah,
or even Cher.
Yeah, wasn't there also a
or
form
in the equivalent of the Canaanite god Choron?
Interesting.
That seems a bit of a stretch, honestly.
I was going to say, I hadn't heard that connection before.
However, most of the H's or A's in the Latinized version of the Egyptian gods is actually chet, because the Egyptian language had a lot of throat
guttural
sonants. So a lot of chet and ayin and stuff.
Also, speaking of, is it true that the word Anochi is derived from Egyptian?
Do you know the Ankh?
That's kind of what I was thinking.
The Ankh is literally in Hebrew Aleph Nun Kaf. Ankh. So I don't know if it is directly related to I am Anochi, but you're writing the both words with the same letters. So again, Aleph Nun Kaf is both in Hebrew I am and the Hebrew name of the Ankh.
And so then, like, Anochi or Anchi would be my Ankh.
Yes, but the question is, what is the meaning of my Ankh?
Well, doesn't Ankh mean like life or life force?
Yes. So,
It almost seems like it's kind of similar to the idea of nafshi, like myself, or like my own soul.
maybe you are right.
Yeah, just a guess, because from what I understand, nefesh is also is derived from the Assyrian context, so it might be a similar context where it's like, you know, like I think if I forget if it's like napushu or something, but it's been so long. But like sometimes I catch a glimpse of it whenever I'm looking at Safari. Anyway, let's continue with this.
Goddesses such as Isis and Sekhmet. In fact, many consider Hathor to be the primeval goddess,
Also,
whom all other
the
Egyptian
fact that
goddesses.
Sekhmet, that her name is Sekhmet, it's so close to Shechem, it makes me think that because both stories both characters are associated with great violence, that there might be a connection somewhere there, but it's hard to say.
Don't know.
Either evolved from
Wait, was that you or the video?
or to be the primeval goddess, whom in fact, many consider Hathor to be the primeval goddess, whom all other Egyptian goddesses either evolved from or were in some way based on. As strange as this may sound, ancient Egyptian mythology was incredibly flexible, with one deity sometimes evolving into another. Occasionally, two different deities were even considered different aspects of the same god or goddess. Hathor was closely associated with the cow, an animal that provided milk and nourishment in ancient times. She was
And
occasionally
psychedelics.
depicted as a pure white cow, but more often as a woman with double horns on her head. Between the horns, she carried a sun disk that was decked out with a uraeus, or upright cobra, that symbolized sovereignty and divinity in ancient Egypt. The sun disk probably goes back to her associations with the sun god Horus and Ra, the god of the sun. Due to the fact that she was around long before any surviving records, it's hard to pinpoint the exact point in history when Hathor first appeared. Some scholars believe her to have been popular as early as 3200 to 3000 BC, due to a cow-headed goddess who appears on the Narmer palette, one of the most significant Egyptian archaeological sites. This theory seems to be supported by a passage from the Pyramid texts, the oldest religious writings in the world. Some, however, argue that the figure in question was actually Bat, another cow goddess whose legend Hathor may have evolved from. Regardless, Hathor is an incredibly ancient deity who had quite a complicated relationship with many of the male deities of ancient Egypt. Take Ra, the sun god, for example. At one time or another, Hathor was rumoured to be his mother, daughter, wife, or any combination of the three. Then there's Horus, the god of the sky. Hathor was said to be his mother, but then again, so was Isis. This is among the many reasons that some people believe that Isis sort of evolved out of Hathor over time, as the two are often hard to differentiate. Though ancient Egypt left us with many questions and only few answers, when it comes to Hathor's origins, there is one story that seems to have been among the most popular. This story implies that while Hathor ended up being the personification of love in her later days, it was only after a fair shadier past. In a story described in an ancient text called the Book of the Heavenly Cow, a tale unfolds in which the mighty sun god Ra becomes incredibly upset with humanity. Much like the biblical god in the story of Noah and the Ark, Ra decided that humans had all turned into wicked, ungrateful creatures. He decided to unleash his wrath on the earth via a war goddess known as Sekhmet, who would serve as the Eye of Ra. Some say that Hathor was turned into Sekhmet. Others say that she was first born as Sekhmet and transformed into Hathor later on. Regardless of the situation, at that point, she was an evil deity. Sekhmet basically went around destroying everything in her path, fueled by a bloodlust unlike anything humanity had previously seen. At first, Ra sat back watching the whole thing with smug satisfaction. But at a certain point, the other gods pointed out that maybe the lesson was going a little too far. So Ra decided to calm Sekhmet down with a batch of strong beer that had been dyed red. Mistaking the beer for blood, Sekhmet drank so much that she passed out for several days. When she awoke, it was in the form of Hathor. From that point on, Hathor became the loving, gentle goddess that all of ancient Egypt grew to know and love.
Wait, so
However, there's
I
more
feel
to
like
the
I'm missing this. It's saying she was Sekhmet before, right?
satisfaction.
That's
But
why
at a
I'm.
certain point, the other
Yeah.
gods pointed out that maybe the lesson was going
So
a little
yeah, this
too
is
far.
why, and it's also very, very very reminiscent of Vedic tradition, where a god can become another god. Just it's like just totally normal. It just happens. But but yeah, I think that there's something really interesting about the fact that you have both in both tradition, with the tradition of Shechem, that the entire town is massacred, and with the story of Sekhmet, that she basically almost slaughters all humanity. I mean, that seems pretty spot on. And again, this is just looking at linguistics. It's entirely possible there is no connection, but the fact that Shechem can also be rendered as Sechem, and in some cases were I mean, like even just looking at the whole idea of the Shibolet, that it was also pronounced Sibolet, indicates that it's not just like this theoretical thing, that people were also pronouncing Shechem as Sechem, just because of the regional variations, which kind of makes you wonder, was there a place where they were actually like personifying that? I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm trying to find like something that predates both of them in order to, but it gets difficult, especially when you have. But see, this is the other thing. Shechem pre-exists the Bible, so theoretically, myths about the story of Shechem should pre-exist that of the Tanakh. But that's also just just a theory on my end. But y'all have any thoughts?
I'll let Afi go first. Okay, I was going to say, if Avi doesn't want to chime in right now, he can go after me. I was picking up some senses of both, Noah's flood there. Again, the idea of, this, being angry at humanity and sending a force with the water to destroy them. And the other one that I thought was interesting is was picking up some of, some echoes of Adam and Eve and the whole Lilith and Eve thing, where you had, the Lilith who wasn't going to get along with Adam, and then, with the Sekhmet, and then you have Hathor, which is the one that will get along with Adam afterwards.
Interesting, especially if you read that as Adam being humanity.
Exactly. Again, I don't know how close it is, but just like I said, hearing echoes of that there.
It's almost like interesting. You get this change from. Okay, so this is interesting. Now, notice this. Sekhmet is a lion goddess. Hathor is a cow goddess. Now, cows are so this is an interesting thing. For like, Asherah is associated with. In fact, where was it that I heard this? Avi, are you aware of any like associations that connect the Sephira of Malchut with the para, with a heifer or a female cow?
No, I don't know.
Where am I getting this from? Dang it. Let's see. Malchut. That's one of the things about having my memory, is I have no clue where I hear half the shit. Malchut, heifer. Interesting. If it's from Chabad, it's an actual Kabbalistic tradition. Even if I don't necessarily agree with everything. The cow jumped over the moon. The Zohar says the red heifer is the first step towards unifying with God. This is the ordinance of the Torah, which is the Lord, which is Adonai's commanded, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel that they may bring you a completely red heifer that has no blemishes and on which never came a yoke." So this is interesting. Let's see, Numbers. Let's open this up. What is it in? Please tell me it. Okay, sweet. It has the Hebrew here. So blemish. Okay. Para aduma tamima. Tamima means like untouched, like, right? It's like simple, innocent. That is ain, but that has not had it. Allah upon it. I think that's. All right, but the thing that's worth pointing out here, going back to, oh wait, yeah, you guys still saw this. All right. As heifer was burned outside the camp by the deputy high priest, and its ashes were used to purify the ritually impure, enabling them to take part in temple activities. Strangely, the one who sprinkles the water with the ashes becomes impure, while the one who is sprinkled becomes pure. It is thus an ordinance in Hebrew, chok. Thus, the name of the parasha because it defies logic. The heifer came to purify; it purifies the impure.
Chok, by the way, is
Law.
No, not just a law. Engraving.
Oh, like chakak.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay, interesting. I didn't even connect that. So because it's like a chok is chakakan, or like a chok is chakak. It's inscribed into the stone.
Because in ancient Greece, they used to engrave the laws of the wall. So the word to engrave became the Hebrew word to a law. When you are chokek, writing something on the wall, the thing that you are writing is probably a law. If you are talking of the reality of the 6th or 7th century BC.
So do you think it's almost like how a statue is a stone image of something, but a statute is something that is usually carved into stone as law?
I think.
Because you have a lot of these like similar ideas that are taken through different languages, even though it's obviously different words. Okay, so this is interesting. So this heifer came to purify, and it purifies them pure. The word heifer in Hebrew, para, is made up of 3 Hebrew letters, Pei, Resh, and Hey. Pei and Resh spell par, meaning heifer, and together their numerical value is 280. 80 plus 200. The number 280 represents the 280 dinim, or judgments, the numerical value of the sum of the 5 Hebrew letters that change form when at the end of a word, mem, nun, sade, pe, and chaf. Since they signal the end of a word, they are equivalent to finality, the opposite of the infinite. They therefore represent distance from the light of the infinite. This finality, maybe that's why there's a tradition around having them be even more value, because that's further value from 1, which is Aleph. But I don't know, that might just be something else. Therefore, okay, this finality is further hinted at by the letter Hey in the word para, which represents the Sephira of Malchut. As such, the para represents the Sephira of Malchut, removed from the influence of the infinite. It is this state that allows for the external forces, the forces of impurity, to flourish. Interesting. Whoa. Wait. How did I not see this before? Okay, so this is okay, this is wild. So another word for thorn is 𐤅𐤀𤐃.
For what? Thorn?
Yeah.
Yes. This is some species of a thorn.
But it's not like it's not acacia.
Not acacia, but let me tell you what the exact modern identification.
A briar.
Of course, a thistle, but spotted golden thistle.
Interesting.
But I think in this in this case, it is a general word for thistle.
Oh, so it's all because like the idea is was this oh wait, I just dropped it down. Where was it? Yeah. Kishoshana ben hachochim. The idea of like a rose amongst thorns, like it's literally referring to rose thorns. Then.
Yes.
Okay. It's just I see thorns and immediately now I'm starting to be like, "Ooh, is this acacia?" But no.
To calm Sekhmet down with a batch of strong beer that had been dyed red.
It's
Mistaking
mandrake
the
beer.
for blood, Sekhmet drank so much that she passed out for several days. When she awoke, it was in the form of Hathor. From that point on, Hathor became the loving, gentle goddess that all of ancient Egypt grew to know and love. However, there's more to the story. Apparently, the hangover she awoke with didn't deter her from seeking out more good times, because she went on to become known as the Queen of
Oh no, she turned that poor Pharaoh into a
mistress of
harp.
inebriety without end. Additionally, Hathor was said to have loved dancing, singing, music, and all forms of revelry.
Okay.
Hope you enjoyed the video, guys.
Oh, that is pretty clear that like Hathor. Yeah, Hathor. That is clear connections to Asherah. I'm wondering, is anyone else pulled up on that? Okay, Asherah, Hathor. It's like there's so many similarities between them that, and I mean, if I remember correctly, she was also very much a Canaanite goddess as well, wasn't she? But like in some ways, there's reason to think that she was essentially a form of Asherah. Graham, you know what I'm talking about?
Not exactly with the Canaanite aspect. I know Hathor was like she was the original divine feminine worship there. Isis was a later development.
Let's see.
Did you know that there is an Egyptian myth about the Great Flood that predates the Bible?
Oh.
Hello and welcome to World History Encyclopedia.
Well, no,
My name is
so-
Kelly, and today's video.
The thing that makes this tricky though is that the word Pharaoh, para, it's not with a hey, it's with an ayin. Now you could say a female pharaoh would be like Farah, or like yeah, it would be para, but it would be like that'd have to be pay ayin. Wait, no, see that's why. Wait, no, it'd be no. Pei Reish Ayin Hey. So I mean, if that were the case with female pharaoh, you definitely have something going there. Let's see, Shechmet or Shechmet, the feminization of Shechem. I could see that. I mean, that's kind of where I was going with. But Hathor and River of Blood runs red. Yeah, maybe Shechem's just I don't know. Maybe Hathor, when she's on her cycle, will become Shechem. I don't know. Some theory of iron-rich soil. Anki, Ankh, life source. The binary begat by Maunmu, which begat all that followed. Both heaven and Sumer constellation is thy throne in the face of Ishtar the thigh. So the word for thigh in ancient Near Eastern context almost always is like indistinguishable from the word for genitals. It's basically loins. So his loins thrown in the face of Ishtar. The loins, another constellation surrounding pole star, Cedar, Asherah pole. Now think about that. The thigh, another constellation, pole star, Cedar, Asherah pole. Nothing.
I think I
Yeah.
think also thigh and shoulder are just names for the connections between the legs and the arms into the body.
Oh, so it's this idea that your shoulders is like where it's like if your arm is strength, your shoulders is double that, or triple that, or like it's something more than just the strength of your arms, but both of them.
I don't know. I think that the Judaism has some issue with these organs, and because it has issues with the corners of the body. So
Yeah, like with Ruth and Boaz, how she was it? She massages his raglav, or no, she uncovers raglav, his feet. But it's like, is it his feet or is it his legs? And what's it implying there? And also, how is it that doing so? All of a sudden, I want to marry you, Ruth. Won't you marry me? She must just be very convincing.
Is all about the ancient Egyptian goddess Hathor, the goddess of love, fertility, protector of women, and so much more. Don't forget, the easiest way to support us is by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and hitting that bell icon for notifications so you don't miss out on any new uploads. If you haven't already heard, World History Encyclopedia has teamed up with Andante Travels to bring you the Treasures of Ancient Greece guided tour. Join our expert tour guide, Dr. Rita Roussos, as she takes you on a journey through classical Athens, to Delphi, across the Gulf of Corinth, and into the Peloponnesian hills, where the hero Hercules began his 12 labors, and King Agamemnon set out to rescue Helen and capture Troy. Make sure to hit the link in the description below to learn all about this amazing trip, and we hope to see you there. Hathor was not only a powerful goddess, but was also one of the most popular in ancient Egypt. And it's not surprising, since she was the goddess of love, fertility, beauty, pleasure, music, dancing, and was also the protector of women and women's health and childbirth.
All things associated.
Hathor originated early in Egyptian history from either the pre-dynastic period or the early dynastic period. And although she doesn't appear too often in the pyramid texts, which are inscriptions regarding the afterlife, she is an important deity in the coffin texts. She was a complex goddess with many responsibilities and associations, and her name, meaning the house of Horus, places her in an important position as mother or consort of Horus, the falcon god. In the pyramid texts, the domain or house of Horus was a place in the sky where the dead king could be rejuvenated, which also links the goddess with rejuvenation and rebirth. As a sky goddess, Hathor was associated with the morning and evening star, Venus, as well as the solar disk.
I'm forgetting who was.
Hathor was an incredibly popular.
Who is the goddess associated with hippos? The name is escaping me.
I don't know.
Graham, do you remember?
It's escaping me at the moment too, and I should know.
Let's see. Dang it, I've got to look this up now because this is bugging me. I remembered something similar to Atirat. Let's see. Hippo, goddess, Egypt. Taweret.
Yeah.
Taweret, Atirat, Hathor, or Hashor, because of the Ta and Sha being interconnected. Like, I would argue that two different aspects of Ashura, are basically Atirat, which could be argued to be like an older form of Ashura. But again, it's not really certain. It might have just been another way that she was vocalized. But basically, that Atirat might have been like this even older sea goddess that was like associated with childbirth. That then those roles were later taken on by Ashura, in the same way that you might have these connections between Taweret and Hathor. And you can even notice how the names are so similar to each other. Oh, interesting. No yoke on a red heifer, a queen never enslaved. The only thing that's really dark, she has to be sacrificed. I don't like that. Why? Interesting, you know what? I wonder if the reason that they sacrificed the red heifer is in order to like as a type of iconoclasm. They're saying like basically they're using they're trying to harness the power of the red heifer, but they want to destroy its image and not have it be living as a symbol of worship.
Well, I also pick up a lot of inversion with the Apis bull there, because you have the Apis bull. It was required to have a certain pattern symbol on it, yet the red heifer needs to be without blemish. And the Apis bull is male, heifer is obviously female. And I wonder how much of that plays into either of those play into the whole golden calf incident tag.
Basically, you get the Apis bull and the red heifer together, and they create the golden calf.
Again, could be. I don't know. I was just throwing out ideas and connections I was seeing.
Popular goddess, and was also known as the patroness of foreign regions, the mistress of drunkenness,
or the goddess
of
of the
song and of
Canaanites.
myrrh, as a solar sky goddess, as a goddess important in the afterlife, and as a goddess closely associated with the god Ra. As the goddess of both gemstones and precious metals, and of foreign lands, Hathor also oversaw foreign trade of minerals and other resources. She was depicted in ancient Egyptian art in many different ways, including as a woman, often indistinguishable from the goddess Isis, as a woman with horns on her head and the sun disk in between them, as a woman with the head of a cow or a cow-woman hybrid head, or completely as a cow, and sometimes as a cow with stars above her. As a bovine, Hathor was particularly venerated in the area of Thebes. Her main center of worship was at the Temple of Dendera, although she was worshipped widely throughout Egypt. And unlike most other deities who only had priests and priestesses of the same gender as the
I'll admit this is totally probably a stretch, but you have 7 slots. Looks a little bit like a menorah. Again, 7, very common number, but it's also just kind of interesting that it's the middle one that's the largest, given it doesn't go higher than it actually goes lower than the others. But it is kind of reminiscent of a menorah. Though I will admit that is a big stretch.
deity, both
I was
men
going to say, you
and
also
women
have
worked
with
in
the
the name.
stars, when you have any time you have stars and you have 7, you got to sit there and at least give at least a nod to the Pleiades tag.
Oh yeah, and what's interesting is that in Canaan, the Pleiades were called the Kotarot, I think. Does that ring a bell, Avi?
Sorry?
There was like a group of Phoenician or Canaanite goddesses called the Kotarot.
Kotarot is from a crown.
Yeah, so it's like the interesting, like let me see if I can find anything on that real quick. So Kotarot, Kotarot, Canaan. Why did that not? Kotar Canaan maybe. Let's see, goddesses of Canaan. 7 goddesses Canaan. Let's see. Canaanite goddesses. Here, it should show up here. Let's see. Here. Kotarat. I guess that's what I should. 7 goddesses. Kotarat. Not Kotarot. I guess it's saying it's Mari and Ugarit. So it's like it's basically up in Syria. But let's see. Wise or cunning. I mean, just this idea of the 7. Could have sworn there was association with the Pleiades directly, but I can't find anything right here. But anyway, let's. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Continue.
Name for Thor. As a goddess of the afterlife, in time, the female dead who were deemed worthy to pass into the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise of eternal life, assumed the likeness and qualities of Hathor, while the male dead continued to be associated with Osiris in the afterlife. Hathor was also worshipped as the 7 Hathors, who set one's destiny at birth, and who also shared in her many attributes and were venerated for their ability to assist in matters of love.
And again, might be a bit of a stretch, but Hathor, Kotar. It's so close.
And after one's death, were venerated for their ability to protect against dark forces in the underworld. Hathor was also known as one of the incarnations of the deity known as the distant goddess, which is a goddess in Egyptian literature who abandons her father Ra and assumes the form of a wild feline, among other shapes, to elude his attempts to find or catch her. She hides in the distant deserts and the arid plains, and in this form as distant goddess, she was linked with transformation and identified with other goddesses like Sekhmet, Bastet, and Mut, whom Hathor sometimes changes into.
So now here's where it can get wild. Because of the easy change from Sakam to Sakan, it almost makes me think there might be some connection here between, and again, could easily be a stretch. I'm not saying this is certain by any means, but I wonder if there's actually a connection that could be drawn between the idea of Sakina or Shekhinah and Sekhmet. Or, I don't know. It seems like a stretch because the idea of Shekhinah is very much opposite to the idea of Sekhmet, but it is also this idea that Sekhmet is Hathor and that Hathor is what Sekhmet becomes. And so it's not as simple to say that, the Shekhinah is comparable to Hathor, but all of a sudden not to Sekhmet. Because especially because you have this idea, I actually have a tradition that, Avi, you probably know more about this than me. I saw it in passing, but this idea that the one who actually visited the plagues upon Egypt was the Shekhinah. Like that Hashem did it through the power of the Shekhinah, which is kind of struck me because it's like, wait, I'm like, in my mind, Shekhinah is all this like, good, like all this stuff that you could maybe see as like stereotypically good, but it's like, okay, then there's all this destruction. I don't know how I feel about that. Any thoughts?
I was going to say mine is you're going to have, anytime you have some good, you're going to have some bad coming with it. You're going to have a balance. So I'm not surprised you're going to see a dark side of the Shekinah.
Wait, so are you telling me, so this lunch that I just got for free, are you telling me there's a catch?
It could be. You get to find out later.
Oof.
I'll tag the Avi and see what he has to say because he's the expert on this.
Joke's on everyone. I don't eat lunch usually. I usually wake up after lunch. Oh God, it's not funny, but it's funny because it's not funny.
The ancient text,
If Avi comes back, I could always pause it.
the Book of the Heavenly Cow, a story that has been compared to writings like Mesopotamia's Atrahasis and the later biblical tale of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood, relates the tale of Hathor being loosed upon humanity to destroy them after Ra becomes enraged by human ingratitude. The Book of the Heavenly Cow dates back to the First Intermediate Period, between 2181 and 2040 BCE, but the extant versions of the story all come from the New Kingdom, circa 1570 to 1069 BCE. At the beginning of the story, Ra 40 BCE, First Intermediate Period, human ingratitude. The Book of the Heavenly Cow dates back to the First Intermediate Period, between 2181 and 2040 BCE, but the extant versions of the story all come from the New Kingdom, circa 1570 to 1069 BCE. At the beginning of the story, Ra is king of the gods and humanity and has created the world, but the humans are plotting against him because they think he's gotten old and can't manage the world's affairs. Ra hears of their scheme to overthrow him and calls the gods to a council for their advice on the matter. Nun suggests Ra sends his eye to smite the humans, and Ra agrees. The Eye of Ra is often personified as a goddess, and in this tale, Ra chooses Hathor to destroy humanity. The goddess is released upon the world, and she kills thousands and transforms into the savage and vengeful goddess Sekhmet in her crazed bloodlust, and doesn't stop when Ra asks her to. With a crazed goddess on the loose, Ra regrets his decision and orders 7,000 jars of beer to be mixed with red ochre to make it look like blood, and then floods the plains of Dendera with it. Hathor Sekhmet continues killing humans until, arriving at Dendera, she drinks the red-coloured beer thinking it's blood, gets drunk, passes out, and wakes up as the peaceful Hathor who is a friend to humanity. This tale not only explains why beer is drunk at the festival of Hathor, but also why one of her epithets is the Lady of Drunkenness. It was also understood as a cautionary tale against the sin of ingratitude, as anyone who heard it would understand that it is never a good idea to complain about a god, much less plot to overthrow him. Do you believe the Book of the Heavenly Cow influenced the story of Noah's Ark? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up.
Kind of interesting that that's where they go with that. I don't see anything that has to do with the flood. I see everything that has to do with the idea of the Nile turning red like blood. But, you know, I could be totally wrong there. It seems very clear to me that in the same way you have these stories that are circulating in the ancient Near East, that it's like, oh, well, you know, this great story that everyone accepts. Well, actually, what you believe is super immoral, and we actually believe something slightly more moral. And so this miracle that one of your gods did, yeah, it was actually ours. So, I mean, honestly, it feels like that's what they were trying to do. And again, I'm not hating. I think it's clever. But people see it now and they're like, oh, those sneaky Jews, they're trying to steal everybody's stories. It's like, no, this is how story writing in the ancient world worked, you dumbass.
I was going to say, I see it more as it's just the same basic themes adapted to the Egyptian experience. That's all.
Definitely, yeah. One moment.
And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our new videos every Tuesday and Friday. This video was brought to you by World History Encyclopedia. For more great articles and interactive content, head to our website via the link below. World History Encyclopedia is a non-profit organization, and you can find us on Patreon, a brilliant site where you can support our work and receive exclusive benefits like this shirt in return. Your support helps us create videos twice a week, so make sure to check it out via the pop-up in the top corner of the screen or via the Patreon link down below.
Interesting. Thebes, 1177 BC. Oh, is this Brian Fagan? I think it's Brian Fagan. I can't tell. It might be Pagan. How the Classics Made Shakespeare, Queens of Jerusalem, When Money Talks, Conquering the Ocean, Ariadne, and 12 Caesars. The Secret of Crete, Archaeology, The Whole Story, Mythology. I can't see this next one. Knossos. Can't see the next one. In Search of the Greeks, Archaeology, The Roman Empire. She has a lot of interesting books. All right. Let's see. So, all right. So Mr. 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 Blazing. I'm going to get it this time. Mr. Blazing Up 420 said, in this text, Kali emerges as an aspect of the goddess Durga. Durga fought a battle between divine and anti-divine forces. Kali grew from her forehead because of her bloodlust and wrath. Interesting. So, here, let's get started. Also, yeah, maybe just to give me another moment, as a bit of a quick recap. So we talked about blood. So the Nile turns to blood. But then we also have the plague of frogs. So now, Egypt, frogs. I'm sure they had frogs in the Nile, But wait a second. Didn't the Egyptians worship animals or believe they were connected with the gods? And so, oh, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. Oh my God, I cannot take this seriously. And because I can't take it seriously, I kind of want to watch it. Well,
I was going to say, it's a shame Pharaoh didn't understand, the saying, if Yahweh sends you frogs, make escargot. Tag.
Graham.
No, frog leg, sorry.
Escargot snails.
Yeah. I was going to say, that's a much more slowly unfolding plague.
Yeah. Honestly, frogs that turn into snails, I feel like it would be easier to... The snails would be easier, let's be real. Frogs are basically airborne, fast snails. They're basically like the, well, there's no real airplane or like air vehicle that hops, so it's not a good comparison. But anyway, what was I was going to say? Oh yeah, since this one video is shorter, let's start with this. And also because I need a little bit of fortitude for this next one.
The Egyptian mythology, 𤤅𤀀𤐃. 𤤅𤀃 was a goddess of childbirth and fertility in ancient Egypt. She was depicted as a frog, or a woman with the head of a frog. The meaning of her name is not certain.
Ribbit.
But possibly derived from the word 𤤅𝐾a, meaning ruler or scepter. Frogs symbolized fruitfulness and new life, and it is thought.
Okay, so this is interesting. So again, I might just be reading this into it, but 𤤅𤀃𝐃 might be derived from this idea of law, or like actually, let me look this up as well. Literally, I love to look up everything. Everything I will look up eventually. Well, actually, not everything, just every root if I can. All right, let's see. B2B online. Hawk. Wait, what's this Ħartsav? What's Ħartsav? Bond, fettered, panged, twisted. Oh, yeah, because I'm pretty sure the word for swastika in Hebrew is Ħartsav Akeres, like or is it Keres Ħartsav? I forget, but it basically means the twisted or hooked cross, which is actually the real word for swastika. Because at least the word that was used in German was Hakenkreuz. And that's a whole other topic, but let's see. Chok, right? Chok. It's going to be further up then. Wait, Chatz? Oh, here, Chakak. There's Chaka. Chaka means to cut in or to carve, like Avi was saying. Chuka is a law, I'm pretty sure. Chakufa is a head of a family of returning.
A very rare word.
Wait, is that connected to like yeah, because here you have kefu, but like just this idea of kafa, because like beit hak futso, like futsa is exile, right?
Yes.
So I wonder if
Then I have to say,
yeah.
I don't even know this word.
Apparently it's in Ezra and Nehemiah. But so what I was thinking is there might be this connection between chak, and again it could just be that like it because I because this idea of inscribing, I think it has more than just this like legal context to it. But basically that there might be some connection with Chaket, because this idea of magic, like a decree, magic. I don't know. It's a real stretch. I don't think so. I'm just trying to see if there's any way I could justify trying to make that connection. Let's see. Hukah, something prescribed in enactment, statute. Come on, is there anything else? Hukok, probable error. Hakar. No. So I can't find anything. That's too bad. I mean, honestly, yeah. I mean, unless I wonder what if I mean, no, I doubt I'm going to find anything here, but I might as well look. Anything with a hey, hack. Nope. It goes right from pay to Raish. Anyway, going back to the video. Oh wait. Oh yeah, no, I did change, so I need to find here. Here it is.
That the high priestesses were trained midwives. According to one tradition, she was the wife of Hanum, the creator god of Abu, Elephantine. He created each person on his potter's wheel, and she brought life into them before they were placed in their mother's womb. Heket and Hanum are depicted on Hatshepsut's birth clonade in her mortuary temple at Deir al-Bahri. Heket holds an ankh symbolizing life to the infant Hatshepsut, and her
And then, never mind.
ka
I was going to say one thing I thought was interesting to note there is where they're located there. That's Elephantine Island. That's where you had the long-standing Jewish enclave during the what was it? At least through the 5th and 4th
Another
century.
name for it is Yeb,
For what?
for Elephantine.
Oh, interesting. Wait, like Yeb is in Yebu?
No, I think it is an Egyptian mystery word.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure Yebu was a region in Egypt. Let's see, Yebu.
But I thought it interesting to note that Hathor was associated with an area that was particularly known to be, a Hebrew, Hebrew Jewish settlement later.
Yeah, okay, so the ruins of Yebu Elephantine Island, Aswan. Yeb and Yebu, it's the same thing. Okay, that's interesting. The other thing, yeah.
You are right. The original name is Yebu, but in Coptic it is Yeb.
Interesting. The other thing I was going to say
And this island is actually the place of Hanum and not Hathor.
No, it wasn't saying that it was Hathor. This is talking about Heket.
And not Heket. So Anovis, Hanum.
Yeah, but Hanum was paired with Heket.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, here, I'll go back a second. So here.
trained midwives. According to one tradition, she was the wife of Hanum, the creator god of Abu, elfin time. He created each person on his potter's wheel, and she brought life into them before they were placed in their mother's womb.
So,
Heket and Hanum are depicted on
and that's interesting because in what that's also a parallel of the tradition of of Hashem, of Adonai creating in the, Genesis 2, you have Hashem creating humanity or Adam from the earth like a potter would, and then he breathes life into him. But this is also kind of even though it's in this case it's not the same. Like I don't think the phrase that's used is like Elohim. I think it's Adonai. But you still have this idea that there's like both masculine and feminine within this, even if it's not explicitly like a hero's gamos. And so within that, it almost seems like it's the same idea. It's just the stories are being reapplied to a Canaanite context.
Hatshepsut's birth cloned in her mortuary temple at Deir al-Bahri. Heket holds an egg symbolizing life to the infant Hatshepsut and her ka. According to another tradition, she was the wife of He, and it was he who crafted each person before she brought life to them.
Now that's really interesting because Hay, if you look at some of the ways that Hay is actually depicted, it's near identical to the basically the hieroglyph that, well, first of all, Hay is the letter Hay, but also it's near identical. Like you can tell the Paleo Hebrew Hay was derived from this Hay. It's someone holding up their arms or holding something like he is. If it's a human in praise, if it's a god in being praised, you can see how he has his hands kind of out like that, like he's calling in praise. But it's interesting because apparently there was also a tradition where instead of Hanum being the one who crafted humanity, it's apparently Hay. And what's interesting is you have two Hays in the name of Adonai, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, but you also have the tradition that it could be like was it like Yah, I forget. There's a bunch of different traditions of what it could be depending on the derivation, but it's kind of interesting that there might be this connection there. Have either of you ever heard of the god Hay?
Just in passing, not in any kind of detail.
I get, and no, you don't need to answer, Avi. I know you're busy, so answer whenever you get a chance, or if no pressure. But so this raises a question: does that mean that there's then also a god named Yod and a goddess named Vav, or rather, Hay should be the goddess, and then Yod and Vav would be the gods? I don't know. I'm taking this joke too far. All right, let's continue.
Finally, she was sometimes considered to be the wife of Horus, the elder, although as a form of Hathor, she was also his mother. Pregnant women wore amulets depicting Heket for protection, and during the Middle Kingdom, ritual ivory knives and clappers inscribed with her name were used to ward off evil during childbirth. She could also bring on labor and offer protection during labor. Heket assisted in his manner in the deliverance of 3/5 dynasty kings. According to a myth recorded in the West Car papyrus in the story of the birth of the three pharaohs, which appears at the end of the tale of Khufu and the magicians. She was also involved in the resurrection of the deceased. In the pyramid text, she assists the pharaoh as he makes this way to the eternal star's sky, and is depicted beneath the funeral pyre of the deceased Osiris in Dendera. There was a Ptolemy temple to Heket at Kas, but only one pylon remains. There is also a reference to a temple at Hawaii in a tomb at Tun al-Gebel. but so far this temple has not been found.
All right, time for the video that I was kind of laughing my ass off at. And this will be interesting, to say a word. Now, how do you think Jordan Peterson is going to interpret this?
The plagues that Moses called down on the Pharaoh, and of course, one of the plagues was a plague of frogs.
Yeah.
And so,
okay, so the frog is a perfect liminal character, because the frog, I think you tweeted about this as well. The frog lives both in water and on land, and so it's like it has a monstrous characteristic that it can cross over. It's one of those things that crosses over between worlds. And so you see that in the stories, like the story of the frog and the princess is a perfect example, and it relates to the Pinocchio story that we talked about earlier. So a princess goes to a pond. She's playing with her favorite thing, which is this golden ball.
What on earth?
And so she drops the ball.
that just to mention something, that golden ball is the same thing as the snitch that Harry Potter chases in the Quidditch games in Harry Potter. And it's funny because inside the snitch is actually part of Voldemort's soul. Right. So
what does this
and so that's part of the soul of evil that's inside the golden ball. And the golden ball in Harry Potter has wings, which makes it a
Are you
round
saying this
chaos.
isn't from a midrash?
Technically speaking, it's an alchemical symbol. And the round chaos is a mercurial symbol. And the spirit Mercury is an emissary of the gods. And so the gods are speaking to you when anything flickers in front of you and captures your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Quidditch game, the person who follows what captures his attention is the seeker, and also the person who wins not so much the game, but the meta game.
What's important, I think, in this story is that the ball is the most important thing.
Right.
So,
that's why it's golden. It's like
that's why it's golden. So for her, it's the idea that it is the most important thing.
Yeah.
So she drops just the idea down into the water and then brings up.
Okay, are we going to actually talk about the Bible?
Into the thing of the highest value.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, that's something for people to really think about marriages, for example.
What?
Within a relationship, and so you emerge.
Well, I think the Bible mentions marriages somewhere.
Actually, it doesn't. There's no word for marriage.
Fair enough.
And having a truthful relationship, and then as a consequence of that,
the word for husband is master, and the word for wife is woman. I'm not justifying it. I'm not endorsing it, but that's the truth. So, Jordan, I'm sorry, but marriage isn't biblical.
The transformation can take place, and you might start with a frog, but maybe you end up with a prince. So
yeah, so like,
excuse me, please do not start off with frogs and end up with princes, because that implies some really disgusting shit. Also, don't listen to people who tell you that frogs were actually men who were transformed into frogs by Cersei. They might just want to see you kiss frogs, and that's kind of weird. So, don't do it. PSA.
Like we talked about the idea that this is the structure of the world, and so it happens as much on a personal level as it does on a social level, on a bigger sense. So just a little hint, we talked about before the story of Abraham and the three angels coming, and
thank God, at least trying to bring it back to the Bible,
announcing the birth of Abraham's son. Well, in the story of Sleeping Beauty, that's exactly what happens. The queen goes to the pond, and there, lo and behold, is a talking frog. And
it's like they think that every story is analogous for any other story just because you can compare them. It's like, okay, but we're trying to maintain some logical consistency.
Into which things plunge. But chaos is an absolute state in some sense. It's the state of the unknown as such. And you never see the unknown as such. You always see something that's partly known and partly unknown. Right, exactly.
And on a show. And so what's interesting is that Kermit the Frog is the same thing, because Kermit is a host. He's a host on a show. And so what he does is he transitions. He's the transition between different worlds. So you have an act, and then you have this transitional figure which appears, and then you have another act. And so that's the role that Kermit the Frog plays on the Muppet Show.
I want to be honest. I feel like I lost brain cells from that. I should have expected that, but yet I thought that maybe I would be hopefully surprised, and I was wrong.
I was going to say, I thought that their title, they dealt with the symbolism of frogs. It just didn't have a whole lot to do with the Bible. One of the things that jumped into my head is if you substitute toads, you can get certain effects by kissing certain types of toads. So, tag.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's really kissing them. I mean, you have to. We're not going to go into it, but yeah, that from what I hear, those are very intense experiences. Not for me. Okay, so let's start, and then we'll get finished soon. So, but oh wait, actually, one second. I forgot something. I will be right back. But yeah, I am. I mean, I really don't know why I expected something more from Jordan Peterson. It's like, here's the thing, like, if he would just stick to his, let's just say, ow, what's this? Oof, chip. Chips are sharp if you don't realize they're chips, and you try to grab them. All right, but no, with Jordan Peterson, I feel like because he doesn't really have much of a background in the Bible, he kind of tries to compensate. And it's one thing if he has people who can compensate for him, but
I was going to say, did you ever watch any of his early Bible stuff? Because he does a pretty good job with Genesis and Exodus, and he approaches it from a psychological interpretation without any reference to anything else. And again, it's an interesting approach to it, and I think there's value in what he was saying, even if again I don't agree with him 100%.
Well, but see, here's the thing, that needs to be a layer on top of something else. If you're relying on that, it's almost like, imagine if you have different, like water from different, or no, it's not a good example. Like, I mean, there needs to be something that actually connects it, something that like for instance, it like the psychology of it. Basically, I don't know. The vibe I get is that even though I know he has read it, it's like I almost feel the way he's talking about it, it's almost as if he could just as well be talking about something else that has nothing to do. Basically, there's nothing unique about the text and how he's addressing it. It's like he's not looking at the context of this. Because you can do a lot of what he's doing by looking at their surrounding societies, but just because he doesn't have that background, or he doesn't bring out someone who knows, or doesn't care to learn a bit more, even though it's pretty easy. I don't know. It's just it feels strange because it feels like he's, I don't know.
I was going to say, if you haven't seen any of his biblical stuff, take a look at it. Okay. Like I said, I found value in it. I thought it was an interesting take.
Yeah, but I mean, something like this had nothing to do with anything.
Oh, I was going to say, this is a poor representation of how he handled the Bible in that lecture series he did. He did a much better job there than what he did here.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's start. Baruch hu et Adonai hamborach, Baruch Adonai hamborach leolam vaed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Eight, sorry. Vesaru hats. Nah, I'm just going to read it because my voice. Vesaru hats fardaim mimecha u mi batecha u me avadecha u me amecha rak bayoer tisharna. So yeah. And the frogs will depart or turn from amongst you, and from your houses, and from your servants, and from your nation. Only in the Yoer, only in the Nile will they remain. Was someone going to say something? I thought I just heard. Oh. ויצא משה ואהרון מעם, I can't. ואהרון מעם פרעה, ויצעק משה אל אדוני על דבר הצפרדעים אשר שם לפרעה. And Moses and Aaron went out from amongst Pharaoh, and they they left, and Pharaoh cried out. Wait, hold on. And Moses and Aaron left from amongst Pharaoh, from his presence, it says. And Moses cried to, okay, that makes sense. Moses cried to Adonai upon the word of the matter, upon the thing that the frogs that were there, he cried to him upon or over the thing, over the matter of the frogs that were there for Pharaoh. It's very strange. He cried out to Adonai in the matter of the frogs. This is very clear, like something's going on here, and I don't know how to interpret it. And I feel like there's definitely something on like the sod level, but I do not know what it's trying to say. From the houses, the courtyards, and the fields, blah blah blah. I don't know. But honestly, maybe that, frog legs, like you said, not kosher, but food for the Egyptians.
Well, the other one, by bringing up Adonai, he could be emphasizing the channeling aspect of it, where it's not Moses and Aaron who's causing the Nile to turn red. There's just the agents of Yahweh doing it. Tag.
I see that. Also, let me see what I'm going into. Let's see. Safaria. 8. 6. Okay, sweet. That's not that bad. And then 6 goes until. Shit, in that case. How much is that? So we'll do that tomorrow. All right, perfect. So we'll finish up soon, and then let's see, was there? Yeah, we'll finish up soon, and then ideally finish the chapter tomorrow because yeah. Let's see. Where's the YouTube though? Because I need a moment. There is really interesting stuff about Egypt, frogs, 𤤅𤀃, but let me see if I can actually find. Let's see. See if what can I find? Uh, 345. Oh, this is perfect. Here.
We are going to read today from the book of Exodus in chapter 8. We have learned a great deal of very important things in the book of Exodus. In chapter 7, for example, we learned that the Bible defines a prophet as someone who is a spokesman for...
Too close for comfort. And by that, I just mean literally talking about the same exact thing. So, oh, this is good.
The second plague. Why did God pick frogs out of everything? It could have been mosquitoes. It could have been rats. Why was it frogs? Are frogs the most annoying thing that there is in the world?
rivet, rivet, rivet. It's very, very disturbing. That's number one. And number two, because they came out of the water. Hashem wanted to show them that the God that they made out of the water is number one. And number two, because they came out of the water. Hashem wanted to show them that the God that they made out of the water is his control. He first turned it into blood, and now he made the frog come out. He wanted to make very clear to them that the water is not a God. The God controls the water. He can control the water. Not only will they not be able to enjoy the water, but the water will be against them. They'll produce frogs that's going to drive them crazy. So that's why you make frogs.
Again, I always like the interpretation of the frogs were a direct result of Plague One,
Theory
where
that
what
was
happened was you turned. Oh, what happened was you turned the Nile red. You killed the fish, so the fish didn't eat the frog eggs. So when all you had an abnormal number of huge amount of frogs that hatched, and then they overwhelmed the land as a result. Again, I stole that from one of those, interpreting the 10 plagues as a result of the Thera eruption tag.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to or trying to find as well. Oh, that's funny. What Zero said. And then Mr. Blazing up 420 said, what happened in the last 20 minutes? Had to leave, dog got out. Ooh, well, hope everything's fine now. So, yeah, here, check this out. Here.
And 𐤅𐤀𤐃 proposed that each of the 10 plagues was an attack or an affront or a challenge to the various gods of Egypt. The problem is, when he started fleshing that out, that as an Egyptologist, you have a pretty good handle on the Egyptian pantheon, of what each god represents. And you start reading 𐤅𤀃's explanation of exactly how this works out. And you start going, okay, that's not right. Like, for example, he'll talk about Seth as a fertility god, and Seth's not a fertility god. Seth is a god of storms, of chaos, of brute strength. He's not a fertility god. So there comes a point where that theory, when you actually start trying to apply that theory to the Egyptian pantheon, it breaks down. This was a theory that was proposed by 𐤅𤀃. And 𐤅𤀃 proposed that each of the 10 plagues was an attack or an affront or a challenge to the various gods of Egypt. The problem is, when he started fleshing that out, that as an Egyptologist, you have a pretty good handle of
That's interesting. It kind of folds back into itself.
And
but he doesn't really debunk it because he's just saying because something about Seth. That's kind of a non sequitur.
Yeah, no, that's the nothing burger.
Did you know in Exodus, the plagues God sent against Egypt were not intended to target humans, except maybe Pharaoh? Numbers 33:4 says they were judgments against Egypt's many gods, and each plague defeated them. Examples: when the Nile was turned to blood, Egyptians thought Hapi, the river god, had been defeated. The plague of frogs demonstrated Heket's defeat, the fertility god who was thought to control the frog population. Lice targeted the Egyptian priests, making them unclean so they couldn't make sacrifices to their gods. The plague of darkness defeated Ra, the sun god, and the death of the firstborn targeted Pharaoh, who was believed to be Ra in human form. Pharaoh was supposed to keep the forces of chaos in check, but when the plagues happened and Pharaoh couldn't do that, it demonstrated God defeating Pharaoh. Did you know in Exodus, the plagues God sent against Egypt were not intended to target humans, except
Today on Digging into Truth, evidence of the plagues of Egypt. The Christian community has been told there is no evidence in Egyptian history that supports the 10 plagues as recorded in the Bible. The reason for the lack of evidence is because scholars have been looking for the Exodus during the reign of Ramesses II. That would
This
be like
does not seem that interesting, not gonna lie. I'm gonna find a better one. Here.
Some of the folks in town are worried that this is a sort of...
Oh, shoot, no, this is from a movie.
I was gonna say, the one that my favorite of them is the one that he had the naked archaeologist doing it with James Cameron.
What are you talking about?
Exodus Decoded?
Huh?
You never saw that? The Cameron, he put up the money and financed 𝐤𐤀𤐃⁰ in order to do a either hour and a half or 2 hour long documentary on the Exodus Decoded, where they go into the various different things like that and explain the
You've probably heard of the 10
their
plagues
eruption.
of Egypt, but what were they? Could they have really happened? And what's the deal with all the frogs? Keep watching to find out more. The traditional account of the plagues of Egypt is told in the Old Testament in the book of Exodus. The story begins with the Israelites migrating to Egypt due to widespread famine. The Israelites originally prospered, but were soon enslaved by the Egyptians, and that's when Moses entered the story. Moses was commanded by God to act as his prophet and free the Israelites. He demanded the release of the enslaved Israelites with his companion Aaron, who acted as Moses' speaker.
Who are you to make their lives bitter in hard bondage? Men shall be ruled by law, not by the will of other men.
As predicted, the Pharaoh refused, and so God inflicted 10 plagues upon Egypt, forcing him to relinquish the Israelites and allow them to escape from Egypt. Almost all reported proof of the Hebrew Exodus has been highly speculative, and the chances are that it did not happen as a dramatic historical event. However, it is likely that a small group of people in Egypt migrated to Canaan, the region located on the far eastern reaches of the Mediterranean. The paper Israel's Exodus in Transdisciplinary Perspective suggests that there was probably some form of exodus forming a historic kernel of truth, but it didn't happen as written in the Old Testament. There is also fierce debate as to when it occurred, with most scholars saying either the 13th century or 15th century BC. Of course, this hasn't prevented scholars from attempting to demonstrate how the plagues themselves could have occurred. Moses let loose the first plague after Aaron stuck his rod in the Nile, which caused its waters and those waters tied to it to turn to blood. This water soon grew putrid, becoming undrinkable and killing off all the fish. The common consensus is that instead of literally turning to blood, the Nile may have been fouled by some other substance. Some scholars have speculated that this condition may have been red tide. This occurs when water conditions allow red algae to proliferate in such great numbers that it can turn the color of water crimson. It is also toxic to some fish and shellfish. This phenomenon has become well known in recent years, with one large outbreak occurring on both coasts of Florida in 2018.
If you're getting exposed to the toxin produced by the red tide, you know right away. You breathe it in, it's like a tear gas.
Another theory has to do with the fallout from a volcanic eruption on the Aegean island of Santorini around the year 1600 BC. Some have suggested that volcanic dust, which includes the red mineral cinnabar, may have caused this biblical disaster. The second plague, in a word, was frogs, and lots of them, as quoted from Exodus 8. And the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house, and into thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and into the house of thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thine ovens, and into thy kneading troughs. So what's the deal with this one? Frogs seem more of an irritant than a plague after all. While it's never clearly explained why frogs could be so damaging, those who push the red tide theory of the first plague have suggested that frogs could have rampantly bred in a river devoid of fish. However, they would have been driven out of the water by a lack of oxygen. Meanwhile, if the volcano theory holds weight and the water was fouled by ash, it would have been so acidic that it would have driven the frogs out of the water. There have also been historical instances of mass movement of frogs, including several occurrences of a phenomenon in which frogs rain down from the sky.
Mulder, toads just fell from the sky.
The parachutes didn't open.
In any case, the Pharaoh temporarily agreed to release the Israelites. After the frogs were killed by God, however, the Pharaoh went back on his word, setting the third plague in motion. The third plague is somewhat nebulous. Exodus 8 tells how Aaron, at the behest of Moses, struck the ground with his rod, which turned the dust to lice. In its analysis of the plagues, the paper Origin of the Old Testament Plagues points out that the Hebrew word kenim has usually been translated to mean gnats, mosquitoes, or lice, basically small biting insects. One theory posits that atmospheric warming may have created warmer swamp-like conditions in which these creatures could have thrived. It's also true that the dead frogs from the end of the second plague would have led to an increase in insect activity. These may have been 𐤅𤀓𐤊𝐻, small biting insects that lay their eggs in the dust and whose larvae feast on corpses such as dead frogs. The Pharaoh, of course, still didn't get the hint, and so the plagues were intensified. The exact nature of the fourth plague is even murkier than the third. The King James Version of Exodus translates it as a plague of flies. However, other translations involve wild animals instead. The Hebrew term used in the Old Testament, arov, means mixture, so it has been hard to pinpoint exactly what this plague was. The Jewish text known as the Haggadah has often been decorated with fierce beasts to depict the fourth plague. But there has been significant debate about whether the term arov means a mixture of wild animals or a mixture of insects. It's perhaps more likely that this plague was indeed made up of insects of some kind, since it is hard to imagine lions, tigers, and wolves invading the Pharaoh's land en masse. If the fourth plague is interpreted as flies, it fits more tightly with the speculative framework of the 10 plagues of Egypt being linked to scientific climate change. Specifically, biting flies would have become abundant in warmer weather. As the Bible tells it, the Pharaoh agreed to let the Israelites go to the wilderness to pray for 3 days if Moses ended the plague, but he went back on his word once more. The fifth plague was an infectious disease that killed the livestock of the Egyptians, but spared that of the Israelites. The King James Version of the Bible reads, "Behold, the hand of the Lord is upon thy cattle which is in the field, upon the horses, upon the asses, upon the camels, upon the oxen, and upon the sheep. There shall be a very grievous murrain." It's easy to see how a plague like this could have happened. For example, rinderpest was an infectious disease that afflicted cattle for centuries.
If you could imagine that you are an owner of 100 animals, a milking herd, by the end of the week, you would have 0.
African horse sickness and blue tongue are 2 diseases that afflict only hooved animals, and they are spread by 𐤅𤀓𤐊𝐻, meaning these illnesses could easily have been spread by the insects found in earlier plagues. Just why this sickness spared all the Hebrew livestock is not easily explained. The one theory is that their livestock may have been situated well away from the insects that acted as a vector for the disease. For the sixth plague, God got personal, as quoted from Exodus 9, "And the Lord said unto Moses and unto Aaron, Take to you handfuls of ashes of the furnace, and let Moses sprinkle it toward the heaven in the sight of Pharaoh. And it shall become small dust in all the land of Egypt, and shall be a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast throughout all the land of Egypt." In trying to figure out a potential cause of this, and small dust in all the land, and let Moses sprinkle it toward the heaven in the sight of Pharaoh. And it shall become small dust in all the land of Egypt, and shall be a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast throughout all the land of Egypt. In trying to figure out a potential cause of this plague, origin of the Old Testament plagues, Egypt, a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast throughout all the land of Egypt. In trying to figure out a potential cause of this plague, origin of the Old Testament plagues links causality from the insect pests of the fourth and fifth plague, speculating that fly larvae could have burrowed into the skin of animals and humans in order to cause such horde swelling. The paper's researchers felt that the tumbo fly larva could be responsible for this, since these grubs have been known to emerge from human legs and buttocks. This would explain why the Pharaoh's magicians could not even stand because of the effects of the boils. The paper Environmental and Medical Aspects Related to the Sixth Plague of Egypt takes a different tack, proposing that the boils were the result of environmental air pollution caused by a volcanic eruption. Regardless of the cause, the Pharaoh did not seem to be too bothered by the boils, so he did not free the Israelites. The seventh plague consisted of fiery hailstorms. The authors of Origin of the Old Testament Plagues propose that this was a result of an El Niño Southern Oscillation superstorm. Another explanation goes back to the theory of a volcanic explosion in Santorini. Such a volcanic eruption may have disrupted weather patterns, perhaps causing severe storms. This seems to be the only plausible kind of scientific explanation for a storm of such intensity. According to tradition, though, the result was disastrous. Entire fields of crops were destroyed, and there was a serious threat of famine. As the story goes, the Pharaoh repented, but only temporarily. It is also notable that biblical scholars found that the seventh plague is treated differently by the text than the other plagues, in that there is more text devoted to this plague than any throughout the Hebrew Bible. This may be because of the significance of the number 7 in ancient Middle Eastern religions. When Moses and Aaron returned to the Pharaoh, they issued a new threat, as quoted in Exodus 10, "And locusts shall cover the face of the earth, that one cannot be able to see the earth, and they shall eat the residue of that which is escaped, which remaineth unto you from the hail, and shall eat every tree which groweth for you out of the field." Some have speculated that the moist and humid conditions caused by the earlier plagues were the ideal conditions for locusts to thrive. Some scientists who support the volcanic explosion theory suggest that the fallout from ash caused the weather anomalies. This would have caused the higher precipitation and humidity. That kind of environment is a prime opportunity for locusts to thrive. In the Bible, the Pharaoh again repented and begged Moses to get rid of the locusts, which were dispersed by a mighty divine wind. And then the pattern repeated, and the Pharaoh once again betrayed the Israelites.
Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal!
By now, it was clear that the Egyptian Pharaoh wasn't getting the hint. So this time, God wanted to do something entirely unnatural. Exodus 10 recounts, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Stretch out thine hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt." This darkness lasted for 3 days, forcing all the Egyptians to stay at home except the Israelites, who had lights within their own houses. One explanation for this plague suggests that a south or southwest wind may have blown an intense sandstorm into Egypt, thus darkening it with very fine particulates. A potential volcanic explosion could have also caused prolonged darkness. Alternatively, the 9th plague could have been a solar eclipse, although there is no recorded solar eclipse that has lasted for 3 days.
You have conquered, Moses. The foot of a slave is on the neck of Egypt.
The 10th plague was the selective killing of all Egyptian firstborn sons and cattle. To prevent the Israelites from being slain, God told them to smear lamb's blood upon their doorways so it would pass over them, and thus the holiday of Passover was born. This plague is the hardest one for experts to offer rational explanations for. Archaeologists have long suggested that a fungal wheat infestation might have caused the deaths of babies and livestock, but this doesn't really explain the selective nature of the 10th plague. Another possible explanation is offered in Origin of the Old Testament plagues,
firstborn
which
slept in a
suggests that
different
the
part of the
waterfalls and
house.
vegetation growth from the 7th plague would have caused a proliferation of mosquitoes, which attracted birds, and the birds passed on deadly diseases to the ancient Egyptians. This explanation strains credulity for the same reason. Though it offers some idea of why vulnerable young children and animals may have died, it does not satisfactorily explain why only the Egyptians were killed. Either way, as religious tradition holds, this plague did the trick, and the Hebrews were freed from slavery. The 10th plague shows better than any other that these scientific explanations are speculative at best, but that is arguably beside the point. The 10 plagues of Egypt are a powerful spiritual statement, and the theme of God as a liberator holds a powerful grip on the spirit and imagination. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about ancient history and myth are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.
Yeah, the one on the 10th plague that I thought was at least somewhat scientific was the idea that it was, like they said, the bad grain, and the reason why it hit the firstborn was they tapped into grain reserves that were bad, and the oldest, the firstborn, gets the first servings, and they would have been the ones affected. Peg.
What about the parents?
The parents would have had a strong enough immune system to survive, is I think the explanation they gave. That's why it would have affected the young.
Oh. Interesting.
3 days of darkness is a little harder to explain.
Mhm. That's not what Passover looks like. They're just like stereotypical Jewish, women blessing candles.
During this investigation, it was evident that the Bible
Oh, wait, that
places
does.
great significance on the Exodus as an event that actually happened. It repeatedly recounts what God did by bringing the Israelites up out of Egypt. However, the lack of Egyptian records for this type of event causes many people to claim that the Exodus didn't happen.
There is no record of a decree by Pharaoh, no monument or tomb inscription that has been uncovered referencing a great exodus in Egypt's past. Is this because the event never occurred, or could there be other reasons? If there was an exodus and there were plagues and there was destruction, it says that Pharaoh's army was destroyed in the sea.
Yeah.
Would that have been recorded, or would it have not been recorded?
Never. You know, by the way, I'll tell you something. The Egyptians never mentioned the bad things in the reliefs of the temples on these things. But as I told you, the Exodus, we know it from the holy books only. But we have nothing from the ancient Egyptian history.
In 2002, on my way back from our first trip to Egypt, we stopped in England for a few days to film Egyptian artifacts in the Rosetta Stone in the British Museum. It was during this layover that I learned about Professor Kenneth Kitchen, one of the world's leading Egyptologists. Our team made its way to the University of Liverpool. I wanted to ask Professor Kitchen why the ancient Egyptians never mentioned the Exodus.
Is there evidence in Egypt or in history that there was an exodus from?
Egypt doesn't record an exodus for the simple reason that exodus is a defeat. A, the literary records, the papyrus records don't exist anymore anyway, and B, no pharaoh ever shows himself or records a defeat, because that would bring him into disfavor with the gods and then with the people of Egypt. Pharaoh is always shown in victorious pose, charging his chariot, defeating the enemy, trampling them down, sacrificing them before the gods. He's never shown losing his people in the sea, cowering back in amazement. He's never shown in defeat. And you're never going to get a military record of a successful exodus by foreigners out of Egypt to the Pharaoh's detriment. That will never happen. And certainly not under Ramesses II. It's completely out of character. It's a bit like the Assyrians, where you have to track down their defeats by noticing on the map where they go. I won a victory at A, B, and C. If on the map that's a retreat, you then know that's his way of recording defeat. And in Egypt, we don't even get that. They would not permit such a thing. Pharaohs are never defeated. And therefore, you're not going to get an Egyptian reference to the Exodus on temple walls. If there was an administrative document, it's gone to mush in the mud of the Delta.
I also asked Professor Kent Weeks, who has done important excavations in the Valley of the Kings, to explain why we shouldn't expect to find reference of an exodus in official Egyptian records.
There's no mention of this in ancient Egyptian sources, and you might say, well, why would there be? Why would the Egyptians carve on their temple walls for all eternity a note saying, yeah, there was big problems in town, we suffered a great loss, or we lost a battle. These are not the things you want to inscribe in perpetuity.
So by the nature of Egyptian mentality, they wouldn't inscribe a defeat if there was one.
They would certainly put the best possible face on a defeat, yes, turn it around. That's not unknown in other cultures, including our own.
Well, there's a poem that Ramesses' son has, it's the Israeli stele, the Merneptah stele, that basically says that all these nations are pacified and they're underneath the control of this dynasty.
Yeah, and that could again be the kind of hyperbole that one finds on many inscriptions during the period. The Egyptians are not likely to say, yes, Pharaoh went into battle, made a series of really stupid blunders and lost the war. Oh, well, we'll build this temple to him anyway. That's not in the Egyptian character. They're going to make the best of a bad situation and or just pass it over as if it never occurred. In other words, I am always a bit doubtful of the historical veracity of inscriptions, particularly those that one would find in a context like this, where it was antithetical to the purpose of the inscriptions to give absolute 100% well-documented historical truth. The whole purpose of the temple was to ensure that Pharaoh's relationship to the gods and his relationship to ordinary mortals like you and me were maintained, that there was a proper balance. And if that required doing what you or I might call shading the truth, but what the ancient Egyptians might have called seeking Ma'at, seeking a higher level of truth than just a newspaper correspondent's description of an event, well, so be it.
Well, that's interesting, because isn't that where most of your information comes from?
Absolutely, and it's one of the reasons that there is so often continued discussion and disagreement about these texts, and why Egyptologists are constantly looking for multiple sources of information to corroborate claims one or another.
So these inscriptions here are telling one side of a story that the Egyptians want us to know.
They are telling one side of a story they could care less about you and me and wanting us to know. They are telling a story in a way that ensures a proper relationship will continue to exist between the gods, the Pharaoh, and the Egyptian population.
Talking to Martin Raven, the curator of the Leiden Museum in Holland, he made a similar observation about the lack of Egyptian records concerning defeats of the pharaohs. If we go back to just the last thoughts about the fact that Egypt didn't record their defeats, when I talked to Ken Kitchen, he said that of course they didn't write about the Exodus if it happened because it was a defeat. Would there have been any evidence of Egypt losing a slave population if it happened?
That's a very good remark. Of course, no people likes to admit defeat, and they wouldn't record it if they could do without it. For propagandistic purposes, it's useless to talk about your defeats. You have to talk about your victories. So even if the Exodus happened, don't ask the Egyptians to write about it.
That's good. Yeah, that's true, because they wouldn't write about it.
No.
Interesting. Okay, well, we'll start up again in a moment. Oh, this looks interesting. Oh wait, no.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that. I was going to say the saying that I learned was that pharaohs never learn; they just win closer and closer to home. Tag.
What were some of the finds
so,
that Petrie made when he was in the Sinai?
Before I forget, so Avi, he had a work meeting, but he wanted to say, he said, I just wanted to tell something about the Arov. In Psalm 78, it is written that Arov came right after the frog, or vice versa. The frog came after the Arov. They came one after the other. So you might think that Arov is an animal that is being eaten by the frog, insects of flies. And so in Psalms 105, it is written that first came the Arov and then the Kinim. And so they are parallel one to another. Or maybe, it's Kinim Arov. Or maybe the same plague. This is what made some to consider the Arov as another document that described the same plague of Kinim, but this time with a warning to Pharaoh, and this is begged to stop it. Yeah, interesting. What's it?
Petrie's work in the Sinai is incredibly important for a number of reasons, but in particular, he uncovered a group of inscribed objects, inscribed with a script which was unknown elsewhere in Egypt. This is the Proto-Sinaitic script. And of course, textual material which Petrie and others were uncovering in Egypt was abundant, but written in scripts which we're very familiar with, hieroglyphic, hieratic, demotic. This was something very different, something very other, and something perhaps which suggested straight away a connection with cultures outside Egypt. Of course, Sinai is a land that sits in between the Nile Valley, which is the heartland of the pharaohs, and the lands to the east into Palestine, Canaan. And so, this region we knew by this point was very important as a sort of bridge between those two lands, those two cultures. And what he had found there was perhaps the evidence that there was a written culture in that area, which was neither one we were familiar with,
Wasn't
Canaan
Egyptian.
and not Egyptian.
Yeah. So something new came forward with that inscription.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's certainly what Peter was finding here was new. This was a new script, a new language, something that very much sat outside what was well established as something Egyptologists knew about in the Nile Valley.
In Sinai, he was so bright that he immediately understood what he was holding.
Yeah.
He said, "This is an alphabet inscription. It's a strange, but somehow first of all he couldn't decipher it. The decipher was the great English Egyptologist Alan Gardiner, 1916, and Petrie had a kind of down-looking way on things, and he called it even the barbaric inscriptions that he found.
Did barbaric
Yeah.
inscriptions.
Another point that I never fail to remind people is that actually the inscriptions that were found around the caves, around the mines where these people were working and writing, were found by his wife, Hilda Petrie.
Mm-hmm.
She was also an Egyptologist, and she picked it up and she gave them to him, and then the whole story started.
Yes. Well, I know that they started finding these, what do you call them, proto-Sinaitic? Is that
Sure.
symbols all around? They gave it the Sinaitic because it was in the Sinai. Is that correct?
Right. 𝐤�𐤀𤐬 is in the Sinai, and so often this writing system that I refer to as early alphabetic. Some people use the term Canaanite, because initially 𝐤�𤤀𤐬 in the Sinai was the place where the first ones were found. That script was quite understandably referred to as Proto-Sinaitic.
We know there's something there that is kind of a transition between the Egyptian hieroglyphic signs and then the kind of monoliteral, one sign equals one sound, which became the basis for the alphabet.
Phonetic, you mean?
Yeah. And so we have, throughout the Sinai, you had workers from the land of Canaan. I think some could have easily been Israelites. That's not, that's disputed, but how do you determine what's Canaanite and what's Hebrew at this stage? And they developed this and wrote these inscriptions.
When you think about the ability to create words, the ability to have words and communicate ideas, that's a very powerful tool. And the idea that where the alphabet came from, is there any new work that you know of concerning the alphabet?
Well, the traditional ideas, the Phoenicians gave us the alphabet, and probably the true alphabet we have did come through them. But certainly it goes back much further than that. Now, Doug Petrovich has done a more controversial work using, in my opinion, some of the clearer text and coming to a decision that the original alphabet, original language was actually Hebrew.
Is there a connection between the Semitic language of, in other words, I know that the Israelites were Semitic people, and the question about if they were in captivity in Egypt, was there any connection to their influence on this hieroglyphic system?
Well, 5 or 10 years ago, I would have told you I have no idea. But I stumbled into evidence of Israelites
Hey, Fortnite, what's up?
At the very time when the Bible says, and where biblical chronology says, the Israelites were about to leave at the time of the Exodus. And that evidence launched me into a study of whether or not there's evidence for the 430-year sojourn, the 430 years of living in Egypt that it describes in Exodus 12:40 and 41. And in stumbling into that evidence, that's where I came to understand that it was Hebrews who wrote the world's oldest alphabetic script.
How did you make that connection?
I made that connection as the result of a study that I had done on some of these inscriptions. And really, it all came from finding evidence of Israelites of Joseph's day who were living in Egypt in the form of epigraphical evidence. And that means written, finding evidence of Israelites of Joseph's day who were living in Egypt in the form of epigraphical evidence. And that means written inscriptions in Middle Egyptian, in hieroglyphic, that identify Joseph, his two eldest sons, Manasseh and then Ephraim, and one of Manasseh's obscure sons that you only read about in Joshua 17.
I have a problem because that's not the reading of these texts. In other words, Ephraim and Manasseh are not mentioned in these inscriptions. Joseph isn't mentioned in these inscriptions. And so it's just not plausible to contend that they were the inventors of the alphabet and that these texts hail from those circles. I wish that we could say that. The difficulty, of course, is that if we say these are references to Ephraim and Manasseh's, and yet we have Egyptian names used for them, not the Hebrew names that we know them by, there's a missing link, as it were, and that link's not there. In other words, the way it works in the field of ancient languages is that positions have to be based in the evidence in a very secure and decisive manner.
Does the language that's this oldest language, does it look like Egyptian characters, or is it similar to, or what's the difference?
So Middle Egyptian hieroglyphics of the day in the 19th century BC, and Middle Egyptian has about roughly 800 or so hieroglyphic signs. And of course, the alphabetic script is much more simplistic. So what happened was early Israelites were the ones who invented the alphabet by taking 22 from among the 800 or so hieroglyphs, and they used them to create an alphabetic script. So 22 consonants were formed using the pictographs, and a pictograph is a pictorial representation in writing of something. And of course, hieroglyphics, it's all based on pictures. And now we have enough examples to show us.
So does it look like there's different, these are actually representing different letters, or
these
different
are
forms of a letter?
These are forms of the letter from different inscriptions. This is 𝐤₂ 1's example of this letter, 𝐤₂ 2's example. So the fifth column represents the Hebrew proto-consonantal letters. That's the first alphabetic consonants as they existed in the Middle Kingdom during the lifetime of Joseph and just a little bit after.
Well, that some of the signs derive from Egyptian signs. Yes, that's long been, well, I won't say known because it's not been proven, but you do have certain signs like the wavy line for, what would it be, meme, I suppose, and
the house, I think.
And pair, yes, for bait and whatnot. But now they have been pressed into service for a West Semitic language, not for an Egyptian one or for any Egyptian dialect. I would like to have evidence of the existence of a Joseph. For me, the Josephs that I know exist only in the story. If there was a Beit Yosef, a house of Joseph, that kind of term does go back to a real ancestor. I mean, the Bnei Israel, the sons of Israel. I'm sure Israel was a real character, and Yaakov as well.
And Jacob.
Jacob, yeah. So, no, I have no difficulty with that. But it's just that outside the Joseph story, I don't see a real Joseph anywhere. Well,
you mean a Joseph that was the prime minister of Egypt that solved the problem?
That's right. And even some of the details about Egyptian life and culture from the Joseph story suggests that late period of writing.
Okay, when
Now-
you say the late period, give people a date.
Okay. Well, in terms of Egyptian history, the Saite period, which would be 664 down to the coming of Alexander, something like that.
Okay, about 300 BC.
Yeah, something like that. So it is really the late period of Egypt's independence. And there were a number of plot motifs that circulated in the literature of the time and the folklore of the time.
Up until now, scholars have told us there was no Hebrew language that was in place for the law of Moses to have been written between 1446 and 1406 BC. But now with the discovery of these inscriptions that go all the way back to 1840 BC, when the first inscription, Hebrew inscription,
Back to the time of Joseph.
to the time, the days of that Joseph was alive, since we now know that that written script existed, we can infer that for hundreds of years it was already in use among the Hebrews before Moses even came onto the scene.
There's been a criticism that it says that Moses could not have written the Bible because he didn't have the ability to write at the time of the Exodus.
He had the ability because he was a prince of Egypt. He was educated. He would have been educated in reading and writing ancient hieroglyphs.
Well, he didn't have the ability to write Hebrew, right?
Well, no, he did, you see. This is the point. With these inscriptions, these Protestantic inscriptions, we have an alphabet now. At the time that I would put Joseph and Moses. In other words, that era is when this comes into being for the first time. So if Joseph, for instance, was the person who invented this method of writing the Semitic language as a script, Moses would have learnt that very easily and very quickly. And that would have been the form of writing that he would use to write the narrative of the Exodus journey, the laws of the Israelites that would be, handed down.
Whoever it was that wrote the Torah was familiar with Egyptian culture. For example, the name Moses, it sounds awfully similar to Tutmosis, Ahmosi. Those are Egyptian names. Sounds very similar to that. Whoever wrote the Torah was familiar with Egyptian culture, with topography of the area, behaviors, norms, and other things. So you have an individual who was familiar with Egyptian life at that period. And here's another example. Semitic languages at the time that this one was originally alleged to have been written, and that I believe it was written, they didn't use a definite article.
What's a definite article?
Whenever we try to make something specific or definite in English, I might say the magnifying glass as opposed to a magnifying glass. So I'm talking about one particular. In Hebrew, you have a definite article that goes back to the time 1400s BC. None of the other Semitic languages had that at that time, but Egyptian did. And it's only to be expected that Hebrew would have developed the use of that particular grammatical form because of the...
It's interesting, but yeah, let's finish up. So, where are we? Ve'as Adonai kidavar Moshe. Nah, I can't. My voice, I can't do it too. Ve'as. Ve'as Adonai kidavar Moshe ve'yamhutu. הצפרדעים מן הבתים, מן החצרות ומן השדות. And Adonai did thus, as the word of Moshe, or as Moshe asked, and the frogs died out from within the houses and from within the courtyards and from within the fields. Vayitzberu otam chamarim v'tib'ash haaretz vayitzberu otam, and they tzabar, and they heaped up the the clay, the mire, the detritus, just got what's the other word for it? Like the chama, like the filth. I don't know. Chamarim, swelling, surging, a heap. Oh, a swelling like it's a heap that's like about to burst, and it stank up the land. And they anyway, yeah, I don't need to go into it. It's not important. Vaera Pharaoh ki hayta ravcha. Respite, relief. Interesting. I wonder if there's any. The root has got to be ruach. And I mean, because I'm wondering is harucha or havracha, harvacha, harucha. Ki hayta harucha v'hachbed et libo v'lo shama alehem kasher diber Adonai. And Pharaoh saw that they had respite, and his heart was made heavy, and he did not hear them as they just as Adonai had spoken. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe emor el Aharon nete et matecha v'hach et afar haaretz v'haya lekinim v'chol eretz Mitzrayim. And Adonai said to Moses, spoke to Moses, saying, "Say to Aaron, stretch out your hand and like over the dust, and strike, and smite the dust of the earth, and it will become it will become for kinim. It'll become like mosquitoes or fly, like sucking or biting, flying insects. But bechol eretz Mitzrayim, in all the land of Egypt. Vaya'asu ken vayet Aharon et yado b'matehu vayach et afar haaretz vatihi hakinim ba'adam ubabehema kol afar haaretz haya kinim v'chol eretz Mitzrayim. And he did thus, and Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff in it, and he struck the dust of the earth, and it became kinim. I'm just going to say kinim, but basically those insects that I mentioned before. On or in humanity, and or they came upon. Wait, where does it say that they came upon? But and they were kinim upon humanity and upon humans and upon the beasts and all the land and all the land that would all the land and in all the land they were kinim in all the land of Egypt. I don't know. All the dust of the earth turned. Where is this? Kolafar ha'aretz. All the dust of the earth was kinim in all the land of Egypt. Okay, that's clever because it uses eretz and aretz here not interchangeably, but it's like in a very clever way. Vaya'asu ken hachadumim בלתיהם להוציאה את הקינים ולא יכלו ותהי הקינים באדם ובהמה. And they did, and the Khartoumim, the enchanters, sorcerers, magicians, did thus, did also Bilatayam in their fire spells to cause Kinim to go out and they were not able to do it. They were not able, and the Kinim were upon man and upon beast. ויאמר החתומים אל פרעה אצבע אלוהים היא ויחזק לב פרעה ולא שמע עליהם כאשר דיבר אדוני. And the magicians said to Pharaoh, Etzba Elohim, what's Etzba? The finger of God. Oh, God's finger, his little finger, it's pointing at us. Its strength. Wait, what? This is a finger of God. Oh, they just said Etzba Elohim he. Oh, it is the finger of God. And Pharaoh's heart was strengthened or hardened. Yeah, strengthened literally. And he did not hear them, just as Adonai had said. What's the samach for? And any thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say I often feel it's a finger of God pointing at me, but not necessarily that. This the one that they're referring to there.
Yeah, I feel like it's like, oh, you naughty human. This is the finger of God, and it's pointing at you because you did something wrong. And did you actually do something wrong, or is someone just saying you did something wrong? Because they're not the same thing.
Exactly.
All right, let's see. Have become ill, started a sneezing headache, yellow mucus, stuffy nose, splitting headache. No, actually gotta go mayherl. If you know, see me again. Good. You'll be fine, Zero. Just stay well and just drink lots of fluids and hope you feel better. I'm hoping that you'll get better, because you will get better.
Avoid the cold.
But you will get better, because the only way out is through. So, got to get through this. Lots of tea. Let's see.
Good luck, Zero.
Yeah. The frog god Kek represented darkness. Kek is the god of chaos and darkness and is associated with hours before dawn. 420 said, "Good day, folks." Oh wait, that might have just been the same one from before, but good day again. Unless, wait, let me see. Did you say anything before? No. Okay, it was just this one before. Mr. Blazing Up 420 said, "Frogs plagues come before the drought. The female craves more females, so they can move away from the coming drought. Get connection to Mercury, the messenger coming before the dawn. If you can catch Mercury very fast." Let's see, where are we reading till? Let's see. So we are on 8 right now, and let's see. So that ends there. So that's C35. I cannot do it right now. So we go until 19, so 18. So that's a few more. So but let's see. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe hashkem. Oh wait, this is interesting. Oh wait, hashkem baboker vahit yatsev lifnei paro hine yotse hamayma ve'amarta elav ko amar Adonai shalach ami vayavduni. And Adonai said to Moshe, early in the morning, station yourself before Pharaoh and behold, as he goes out to the waters, and say to him, thus said Adonai, who has sent, let my people go that they may serve me. Ki im einecha משלח את עמי, הנני משליח בך, ובעבדיך ובעמך ובבדיך את הערוב. ומלאו בתי מצרים את הערוב, וגם האדמה אשר הם עליה. Because if you do not let my people go, behold, I will let in you, or let upon you, and upon your servants, and upon your nation, and upon your house, the swarm, or mixture, or incessant motion, plague of stinging flies coming in swarming. It's uncertain, but umalu, and your houses will be filled, and the houses of Egypt will be filled with arov, with like a with swarms, and also the earth that is theirs upon it. The ground that they are upon will also be swarmed or filled. Vegam. It said vegam. Yeah, vegam. והפלאתי ביום ההוא את הארץ גושן, אשר עמי עומד עליה לבלתי היות שם ערוב, למען תדע כי אני אדוני בקרב הארץ. And on that day, I will distinguish you from I will distinguish the land of Goshen, that is Amiomed, that is where my people stand or dwell upon it, Levilti, so that Levilti Hayot Sham, so that their Orev refuses to know it, or so that there they do not know. So that they shall not be there, and so that you will know that I am Adonai in the midst of the land. That's an interesting way of saying it. So that's 18, and that's where we finish off. So here, let me close that, and then we'll Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chaye olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. So we still have 2 parts left, and we'll do that later today at some point, or tomorrow, or whatever. Same stuff. So you have any thoughts before? I'm going to probably we'll finish that last video and then we'll close out. But you have any thoughts?
Well, it's jumping out to me how, all the different various interpretations. You have the, it's like the Exodus becomes like a Rorschach test, where you're just like you can get out so much different parts of it, and that's one of the reasons why I like, I've kind of settled into that pluriform interpretation, where just because one interpretation has some merit and can be true doesn't mean other ones can't as well. And it's so much nicer than arguing over this is the real meaning. That's just a battle that's not worth fighting. Tag.
Yeah, it's like, well, this is what the authorities say. It's like, what authorities? There's 70 different interpretations.
Well, isn't that the saying? You put 3 rabbis in a room, they come out with 5 different midrashes.
Yeah, you put one Torah in the room, you get 70 different interpretations. Yet somehow, when they translated it the exact same way. But when it comes to actual interpretation, that's where they don't agree.
Exactly. They agree on the words. The meanings are a whole different story.
But see, that's the fascinating thing, because when you translate something, you're inherently interpreting it. So that seems to imply something else was going on there.
We won't speculate as to what.
Interaction of the Hebrews with the Egyptians of the day.
So there's the use of the in front of defining something.
Right.
What's unique about Sinai 377 as an inscription?
Sinai 377 represents what I know to be the oldest Hebrew alphabetic inscription in existence. If we take this image now and take away the photo, this is what it would look like if it's just the letters on here. Well, so we have 2 inscriptions side by side, intricately bound. Sinai 377 in Hebrew, Sinai 46 in Middle Egyptian. At the top, in what's called the lunette, is the year date. Then the name of the king is given here. And that locks it in place chronologically. So this Middle Egyptian inscription is connected to this inscription because of how the 2 stelliforms are formed, made to be as part of one. And we know that it's connected because we have the same breaking down of the stone here in this place as we do here in that inscription. So it's uniformly worn down over time.
What date were the inscriptions at the Sinai mines, and how do we know?
Right. That's a debated point. Most people argue that they hail from the Middle Kingdom. Both the inscriptions from 𐤅𤐀𤐃 and those from Wadi al-Hol are, in essence, argued to be Middle Kingdom. Usually we posit that they date to around 1800 BCE. One of the reasons we do that is because, for example, at Wadi al-Hol, the inscriptions that are closest are actually Middle Kingdom texts, and the same is true for the Saravid inscriptions. The difficulty is that just because there are inscriptions close, Northwest Semitic inscriptions close to hieroglyphic inscriptions or hieratic inscriptions, one can't assume that they must have been put there at the same time.
Is this one of the very first inscriptions that show you that there's a Semitic connection to ancient Egypt?
Yes. And if we look at this inscription, now it gives you a full showing of the stelliform. And then if all of this is drawn in, which I did with computer generation, you take away the photo and this is what you're left with. These 2 inscriptions are connected. The Hebrew inscription reads Malal Opheh, which the verb comes first and then comes the subject. And it's saying the baker has inscribed, and that's it. It doesn't say what he inscribed, but the implied direct object of what he inscribed is this stella, this stelliform inscription. So it's almost like graffiti in a sense that if you were going out to a park and you went deep into the park and you found a beautiful stone there, you could write, Tim Mahoney was here. It's similar to that in that the baker is saying, the baker has inscribed this inscription, and that's all.
And once this thing was invented, one should remember, there were no schools, there were no institution, nobody was interested in this, excuse me, ugly, I don't want to say ugly words here, but it was
It did
Consider
have the beauty of let's say Egypt.
and it's so
hieroglyphs.
ugly. Have you seen it? How
Yes, I
ugly
have,
it
yeah.
is. One is big, but one letter is big and one is small, and
Yeah.
they look different. And so it was a kind of a secret script or something that ran away among these simple people, the miners, the soldiers, all the people that ran around, all the Canaanites that were running around in between Egypt and Sinai and Canaan in this period. You know, Canaanites were moving around all the time, and they could write their names. This is what you needed it for. You would like to write your name, especially to leave it for the gods. You know, it's very important.
This inscription is telling you the time of the potential relationship of
Exactly, the time that both of them were written. And what it's telling you is that the Hebrew writer of Sinai 377 and the Egyptian writer of Sinai 46 were on friendly terms with each other. They had some kind of important connection between them.
It's hard to read this text too, isn't it?
These texts are difficult to read. And part of the reason it's difficult to read them is because the people writing them were writing on surfaces that weren't perfect for writing.
Sides of rocks.
That's
caves,
right.
right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Or statuary. And so in the case of some of the Serbid inscriptions, of course, as well, that's a better surface. But
have you ever tried to go into a cave and write anything? I don't know if it's allowed, but it's not easy to scratch necessarily, depending on what you have. I mean, it's not easy to leave a mark.
That's right. And I suppose that what I would then note the obvious, someone's attempt to state that they can not only read these inscriptions, but read names that we know from the Bible, or posit that we have people present in these inscriptions from the Bible. It's a difficult thing indeed. And to use an expression that we sometimes use in the South, that dog won't hunt. In other words, you just can't do that. You have to have a bit of evidence for these proposals, and it's just not there.
You are building a case that Joseph and his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, were really the originators of this early Semitic language, the written part of it. This would have been transferred through the generations then of the Hebrews in Egypt. Would they have been learning this?
I think that the fact that we see Middle Kingdom inscriptions from 1840 BC, 1834 BC, 1831 BC, 1772 BC, we see these Middle Kingdom inscriptions in perfect form of Hebrew, and then we see it in the New Kingdom in roughly 1480 to 1446. That shows a great continuity over those hundreds of years, that even though the script itself worsened in the sense that it became more abstract, less pictographic, and less beautiful, nonetheless, all of the important elements of language were maintained.
That's going to be disputed by most scholars simply because in his determination and in his translations, he's found people and characters and things related to Israel's history, which they don't like them because of where they're dated. Pushes it back to the 15th century BC, and they're not comfortable with that particular dating system for some of these things. And but nevertheless, it's a seminal work that needs to be investigated and carefully read.
Definitely interesting. Let's see.
David, for me, I think these inscriptions are really exciting. The whole concept that the alphabet came out of these, I mean, that there's proof that this is where it began. There's something pretty exciting here.
It's exciting for me because I've personally been there to see them. And that was one of the reasons I went to Sinai in the first place with my expeditions, was to go and locate these inscriptions. They're called Proto-Sinaitic, All that simply means is that the earliest form of writing we find in Sinai, and that's where they were first found, which is why it's got the label. Other people would call them early alphabetic scripts. But what was amazing was the fact that they evolve, it would appear, out of Egyptian hieroglyphs. So some clever person, a Semite, has taken the Egyptian hieroglyphs and he said, okay, this shape is the shape of a house. Okay, now Egyptian, that word would be pair for house. But in Hebrew, or in Northwest Semitic languages, the word is bait. Okay, so this shape, this hieroglyphic shape, becomes the letter B for bait. Okay, now, and that's what they did. That's how our alphabet arrives at from these early signs. You could do it with every one of those signs can convert in our modern alphabet.
So somebody with an understanding of Egyptian hieroglyphs, who was a Semite, right?
Yeah.
At a particular time in history, grabbed onto these symbols,
yeah,
and used them and made them something different.
Made them something very special, an alphabet, because ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs are not an alphabet. Ancient cuneiform is not an alphabet. None of them are. They're syllabic scripts, okay? So here we have, for the first time, the use of 26, 27, some people say 22 signs that are consonants that they can combine to make words, and that's the real skill of it here. There are no vowels written at this time. It's still only consonants, but you can make so many combinations of words from these few letters.
And we have 26 letters in the alphabet right now, so not very much has changed for almost, what, 4,000 years?
All they've added is the vowels.
Yeah, or actually, it's probably, what would it be? It would be actually more than, would it be about 4,000 years, wouldn't it have been, when this alphabet was?
It's 3,500, well, yes, no, you're quite right, actually. It would be between 3,500 and, say, 4,000 years ago.
That this alphabet came about.
Yeah.
And it's been, so you can just move letters around and create words.
Yeah, absolutely.
So people have been critical of even the existence of Moses, and they're saying that Moses couldn't even have written any of this, and that the Bible, the early parts of the Bible were written 1,000 years after the event of the Exodus. And why I find this interesting with the alphabet is this Semitic Northwestern, what would you call it? Northwest Semitic?
Northwest Semitic is the safe way to describe it, because it quite clearly is Northwest Semitic. Whether we can say it's Hebrew is not a matter of looking at the language and the script. That's a matter of when it all happened. It's a matter of history, in other words. So if we have Moses placed in this period of the Middle Bronze Age, the time of the 12th and 13th dynasty in Egypt, if Moses was alive then you can say it's Hebrew. If you want to put Moses in the time of Ramesses II, then it can't be Hebrew, because it's too early to be Hebrew. And that's the crunch of the whole thing.
No, I don't think I followed you with that. Why couldn't it be Hebrew if it's in the time of Ramesses?
Because if you're saying basically that Moses and Joseph were actually later in time than when this script was invented for the first time, then somebody other than Hebrews or Israelites must have invented it. It couldn't have been them.
Okay, I get it now. So, I mean, that's why, and one of the reasons why people won't call it Hebrew, even though it's an early form of Hebrew, is because Moses and these people couldn't have existed, because it wasn't until 500 or 600 BC that the story was created.
That's a different issue. That's the argument that the biblical stories were written down at the time of Josiah, King Josiah, or perhaps Jeremiah might have been the author. Some people have suggested that. I would prefer to see it that they were compilers of the Bible. In other words, these texts were already written, but they brought them together to create what we call the Tanakh. Jeremiah might have been the author. Some people have suggested that. I would prefer to see it that they were compilers of the Bible. In other words, these texts were already written, but they brought them together to create what we call the Tanakh, the entire Old Testament. And so that's the action that might have been going on in the 7th century BC, not the actual writing of them, but the compiling of them, and maybe some editing was going on as well. We talked about that example of Ramesses being the name given to the city that the Israelites lived in. Well, we think it's probably Avaris that they lived in, and that name has been changed at the time of Josiah for the audience of Josiah's day. At that time, they would have known about Ramesses, but they would never have known about Avaris.
So if this Northwest Semitic script was available, and you're looking at the Middle Kingdom as being a time when the Exodus could have happened,
Sure.
do you think that Moses could have then written the first 5 books?
The clue to this is not just simply identifying it as biblical Hebrew, but actually reading it. Once you know what the contents were of these inscriptions, once you can read them and actually make out what's being said here, and when you find things like the word manna being said, the word manna occurs in this script, that's part of the biblical story.
Let's talk about that inscription. So you took these inscriptions, you've been to that location, and you took these inscriptions and contacted a rabbi in Jerusalem.
Yeah, that was a very interesting experiment. I thought, well, you know, I'm not a Semiticist. I'm not the sort of person who could actually delve deeply into this. I can identify the signs into Hebrew letters. I know which signs represent which Hebrew letters. So what I did was I copied down all these inscriptions into Hebrew letters and sent them to the rabbi. Okay, now I'd never met him. We'd done all this by the internet. And I just simply said to him, look, I'm sending you some sentences in Hebrew. Can you make anything of them? Can you read them? Are they gobbledygook? What do you make of this? Do we read them left to right, right to left? Who knows? I'm leaving it up to you to decide what you think this is. And within 24 hours, he sent me an email back and he said, this is biblical Hebrew. I can read it as if I was reading a Torah scroll. It's biblical Hebrew. It makes absolute sense to me. I'm a rabbinical scholar. I know my Torah. And I can read this straight off the page.
What were some of the things that were written there?
Well, there are things like instructions how to use manna. Not to, you know that in the Bible there's a big thing about, you know, you mustn't store it. You have to eat it when it's given to you. And this thing says, pay attention to the way you use manna. You know, follow the Father and his instructions. It also says things like, I uprooted a beautiful garden. Now, what does that mean? It means that the Israelite slaves, have been uprooted from the garden, which is a reference to Egypt. We hear about Egypt being called the garden. They've been uprooted from there, they've left it and come into Sinai. All these things relate to the biblical story of Exodus, and they're there on the rock walls.
And this is what Flinders Petrie found in Hilda.
Yeah.
What I understand is that it was a while for them to interpret it. Why couldn't they see the connection between Hebrew today and this ancient language?
It was a difficult one, really, I suppose. They weren't themselves familiar with the Semitic languages and script. They were Egyptologists, of course. They had to have a specialist to come along who really got to grips with it, and that was Sir Alan Gardiner. And he was a great scholar of different languages and scripts. And he managed to translate one simple phrase, if you like, into Northwest Semitic. And that was the point at which we all decided that Northwest Semitic was what this was represented here in these inscriptions. But even then, it's taken us forever to actually translate them because nobody's been trying to read them as biblical Hebrew. They've been struggling to try them in a different way. So I go and I send this stuff to the rabbinical scholar in Israel, Rabbi Michael, and he just comes back and says, well, I can read it straight off the page.
And what type of I mean, he has a Yemenite background. Would he have seen the text? Like, did Hebrew text change over time, or?
It's more the fact that the Yemenite tradition is more conservative. It's been maintained over the centuries. It's not as a modern Hebrew, if you like. It's much more ancient. The traditions are more ancient. And therefore, you get closer to the original language of the Bible by studying through the Yemenite school.
I know you've suggested that the people haven't been able to find evidence for the characters in the Bible because they're looking in the wrong time. Do you think that there's any connection to this, not seeing evidence earlier with this whole connection to the Northwest Semitic language?
In a sense, when you propose a new idea, a theory, if you like, you put it down, you present it to your peers, and you present it to the public. And then it's tested. And the way it's tested is you try and find the evidence to confirm whether the theory is right or to knock the theory down. This discovery was made many years ago of these inscriptions in Sinai, but I didn't start looking at them until after I'd written the theory of the new chronology. So for me, this is new evidence that proves that Moses did exist at the right time period that I would place Moses, and he's writing a Hebrew script that would enable him to write the laws of Moses and the itinerary of the Exodus, and even possibly the book of Genesis itself. Now that to me is a proof for the new chronology. It shows that this is the real time period of the Exodus. This is the real time period of the wanderings, and this is the real time period of the conquest.
You said the book of Genesis. Did you mean book of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy?
No, I meant that he'd written the itinerary, etc., and he may even have written the book of Genesis.
Okay.
Because in fact, that's the one book that everybody says he could not have written. Yeah, the impossible one. Yeah, because there's just no way you could write something as long as that and complex as that. You might be able to write Numbers and Deuteronomy because the laws. That's the sort of thing you could expect a leader to be writing laws.
Who do you think actually was the inspiration for this alphabet?
I think it has to be Joseph. That would be my guess, because of what he was. He was the vizier of Egypt. He was the most important man in Egypt after the Pharaoh. He was educated. He worked in the palace. He was running the country virtually. He was an administrator. Now, he was familiar with Egyptian hieroglyphs. So what better person to invent the Hebrew alphabet than the person who was familiar with the hieroglyphs, who knew the Semitic people, who was administering the land? He's the guy who's most likely to be able to come up with this idea.
Well, I know that some people, there must have been a lot of people who've looked at this language earlier or this text, this script, right? There must have been a number of people who looked at it. Do scripts have to sort of grow over time, and they change their shapes and their forms? Didn't Hebrew actually change over time? Early forms of Hebrew were different than the Hebrew we have today?
Yeah, if you look at modern Hebrew, even if you look at biblical Hebrew from the 9th century or the time of Josiah, the 7th century, it's very different to these Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions that we find. The letters look rather different, but you can see how they evolve from it. And time is the thing that makes these things change.
And so if we think about this first alphabet, it's Northwest Semitic. People just didn't know who to assign it to, right? They just couldn't figure that out in the beginning.
They just thought it was Northwest Semitic. They couldn't say any more than that. But the fact is that we've inherited the entire alphabet from these people, from whoever it was, whether it was Joseph or somebody else.
People such as Professor Rolston say that it can't be Hebrew because the Hebrew writing didn't exist until much later in time.
That's true. He calls this language Northwest Semitic. These inscriptions are Northwest Semitic. But I say it's a matter of history, not a matter of language. You can interpret them as Hebrew only if you have the history to back it up. So it's all about history, not so much about language. I'm an old romantic. When I see something like this in the desert, I have to believe that Joseph was the inventor of this script. I have to believe that Moses used this script to write the laws. I have to believe that Moses was the guy who actually physically carved these inscriptions on the rocks. And so for me, this is very, very fulfilling that we have things that make the Bible come to life, inscriptions that make the Bible come to life for the very first time. And this era, which is always supposed to be mythology, not real history. And here we have texts carved on the wall that could be the work of Moses, the words of Moses, in the Sinai Peninsula. And that is terrifically exciting.
All right. Any last thoughts before we close out?
I was going to say, my reaction was there when he sat there and said it was probably a Semite was doing it. It's like, why does everybody have to blame Semites for everything?
Funny.
No, admittedly, for when it comes to creating the Hebrew alphabet, yeah, there's probably a legitimate guess.
Yeah. So let's see. Recap the 10 plagues in order. Let's see. Dam, Tzfardea, Kinim, Arov, Derech. Wait. Dam, Tzfardea, Kinim, Arov, Dever, Shchin. I don't know. Arbe, some Choshech, Makat, Ha, Bechorot. It's like blood. It's going to take me long. Let's see. Blood, frogs, key names, so like flies, swarms, disease, boils. I forget. I think something to do with like leprosy, maybe. I forget.
Well, that was the boils. I thought it was hailstones.
Oh, right. The hailstones, like the hail and the fire, darkness, and then death of the firstborn. Let's see. And then 420 says when the female marijuana plant is stressed, it turns a branch male, it pollinates the mother. Every seed of the mother is female seed. There's no male DNA in the male branch. Is that a miracle? I don't think that's true, because if it's not around any like if you have I mean it depends if you have a female plant and it's not, I don't know what you're talking about, because you still need you need the pollen from somewhere. Like I mean I'm sure it can happen, but like it doesn't mean that there's no male DNA in there. I don't think so. I'm like surely.
Well,
yeah.
What they're basically it produces the pollen, but the pollen doesn't contain any male DNA because there was no male DNA in the female plant to start with.
But no, see, that's the thing. The whole idea of sensimia is that you stress out the plant so that it, I think they might have gotten it messed up. It produces more THC that way. It can't self-pollinate.
Well, it can self-pollinate because even with female seeds, if you keep reflowering them,
Well, if
it'll
it's
eventually.
hermaphroditic.
What's that?
If it's hermaphroditic.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, if it's what is the DNA of the seeds? Again, I would have to look into exactly how the DNA for the for the plants work here. Again, it works differently than like the XY that humans worked off of.
So you're wrong. You can put silver on the branch, it turns. Well, then it's not it doing it. It's responding to a stimulus that you're giving it. It's not like it's just doing that out of the necessity to self-pollinate. Because if that were the case, you wouldn't be able to produce sensimia.
Well, you want to keep all pollen away. It does you for sensimia. You just want to avoid pollen regardless.
Yeah, but no, I mean any pollen.
But part of the point of this one is you only produce female seeds this way. If you're basically like a seed bank, that's a way to produce female seeds that you're comfortable with them being female seeds, as opposed to like in the wild, you'd have it mixed male and female. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah. I honestly, I do need to look it up more. But my point is that it's not doing it of its own volition in that case. If you're giving it a stimulus to cause it to do that,
While that's true, it will happen in the wild. Like I sat there and said, is a female plant, it'll turn male at the very end, and some of that could very well be a survival instinct, so it produces at least some seeds to produce some female plants the next year. Tag.
So, I mean, if that, I'm just failing to understand. So if you have a female plant and you keep it away from any male plants, how will it eventually do that?
Because as it ages, eventually towards the end there, it'll start producing the male flowers. It'll produce flowers, not just the stamens and the trichomes.
Really?
Yeah.
How far along?
Usually about the second reflowering cycle.
What do you mean second reflowering cycle?
Well, if you do indoor growing, you force the flowering based off of the photocycle.
Yeah.
you reduce the sundown, the sundown to say like 8 hours a day rather than keeping it 24/7.
Yeah,
when
but
you,
what do you mean?
what
Like you harvest the plant and then you let it grow back or something?
yes, you reharvest it and you put it back into the vegetative phase, and you sit there at either turn it back vegetative or you keep it on the lower cycle and you allow it to bud again for a second and maybe a third crop.
Is that more efficient than just getting a new batch?
Depends on your price constraints and everything.
Fair. Interesting. I didn't know that. I thought that once you harvested a plant that
Yeah, no, you can produce at least. It's not as strong as the first one. The first one's always the best one, but no, you can produce a second crop.
Interesting. Well, that let's see. Is well known. It is a well-known fact to those who grow pot. You don't stress your plants, or you'll get seeds. Interesting. Anyway, I gotta get going, but this was fun, and we'll do it again soon. So until next time, let's see, where is it?
Want to tell the Rebbe the words of the new song that we're singing with Mashiach, right? So I'm just going to read him. Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. Okay? We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. Oh yeah, Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be this year. Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait.